The hammer clicked back on Charles Whitmore's revolver as he stood in the dusty main street of Willow Creek, Wyoming. "She's mine by law, rancher. Her father sold her to pay his debts." Caleb Warren's weathered hand hovered over his own gun, knowing he'd never drawn on a man before today. Between them stood Anna Foster, the bride he'd ordered plain and practical, who arrived beautiful enough to destroy everything he'd built from grief. Welcome to a story of love, survival, and the price of freedom in the American West. Stay with me until the end, and don't forget to comment your city below. I'd love to know how far this tale has traveled. The Wyoming sun beat down mercilessly on the parched earth, turning the grass to brittle gold that crunched beneath Caleb Warren's worn boots. He stood at the edge of his property, surveying land that had once bloomed with promise, but now seemed to mirror the emptiness in his chest. 3 years had passed since Martha died, 3 years since laughter had echoed through the modest ranch house, 3 years of silence, broken only by the lowing of cattle and the whisper of wind through dead grass. At 32, Caleb had the look of a man who'd aged a decade in half that time. His face, once considered handsome by the ladies of Willow Creek, now bore deep lines carved by sun and sorrow. His dark hair, which Martha used to trim with loving care every Sunday after church, hung shaggy beneath his hat. His blue eyes, she'd always said they reminded her of summer skies, had dulled to the color of a storm gathering on the horizon. "Damn drought," he muttered, kicking at a clump of dead sagebrush. But he knew it wasn't just the lack of rain killing his ranch. It was the lack of hands to work it, the lack of someone to cook meals that consisted of more than beans and bitter coffee, the lack of a reason to keep fighting against the harsh Wyoming elements. He turned back toward the house, its unpainted boards weathered gray as old bones. The porch. Martha had loved where she'd sit shelling peas and humming hymns sagged at one corner. The garden she'd tended with such pride was nothing but dust and memories. Even the curtains she'd sewn from flour sacks had faded until they were ghosts of their former cheerful yellow. Inside the house felt like a tomb. Dust motes danced in the shaft of light streaming through the kitchen window, settling on surfaces Caleb rarely bothered to clean. He slumped into the chair at the head of the table. Martha's chair sat across from him, untouched since the day she died, as if waiting for her to return from some errand in town. The letter from his sister in Denver lay before him, its edges worn from repeated reading. "Dear Caleb," it began in Sarah's neat script, "I write with growing concern for your welfare. The Hendersons passed through last month and spoke of your situation. Brother, you cannot continue this way. The ranch needs a woman's touch, and more importantly, you need companionship. I've enclosed information about the matrimonial news. Many respectable men have found suitable wives through their services. Please, for Martha's memory, if not for yourself, consider it." Caleb had laughed bitterly when he first read those words. Martha's memory was exactly why he couldn't imagine another woman in this house, in his life, in his bed. But as weeks passed and the ranch continued its slow decline, as neighbors stopped visiting because his solitude made them uncomfortable, as even his own reflection became foreign to him, Sarah's suggestion began to seem less absurd. The advertisement his sister had included was simple. Matrimonial news, connecting hearts across the frontier, widowers, bachelors, and spinsters. Welcome to discretion assured. He'd written and destroyed a dozen letters before finally sending one. The whiskey had helped with that final version, loosening his pen enough to commit his requirements to paper. He remembered every word, "to whom it may concern." "I am a rancher in Wyoming, age 32. Seeking a wife for practical purposes. My requirements are simple. She must be plain in appearance, sturdy in constitution, skilled in household management, and of appropriate age, 25 to 35 preferred. I'm not seeking beauty or romance, merely a capable partner to share the work of frontier life. Appearance is of no importance. I stress this point. Send no photographs. I can provide a good home, respectful treatment, and stable situation for the right woman. See Warren, Willow Creek, Wyoming." He'd been specific about plainness for good reason. Beauty was dangerous. Beauty made men foolish. Beauty could destroy everything a man built. He'd seen it happen to others, good men brought low by pretty faces and scheming hearts. Tom Morrison had lost his store chasing after the saloon singer. Pete Daniels had abandoned his family for a younger woman who'd cleaned out his bank account and disappeared on the Eastern train. No, Martha had been pretty enough, but it was her kindness that had won him. Her gentle nature, her quiet strength, her dedication to their life together. That's what he needed now, if he needed anything at all beyond an extra pair of hands to help with the cooking and cleaning. The response had come 6 weeks later, formal and brief. Mr. Warren, we have matched your requirements with a suitable candidate. Miss Anna Foster, age 28, describes herself as practical and capable. She is willing to travel to Wyoming immediately upon your confirmation. No photograph enclosed per your request. Please wire funds for train passage if acceptable. Matrimonial News Agency. Anna Foster. The name meant nothing to him, which was perfect. He'd wired the money the same day, telling himself it was purely business. He needed help. She needed a situation. Simple as that. Now, 3 weeks later, he stood in his bedroom attempting to make himself presentable for her arrival. The mirror, clouded with age and neglect, showed him a man he barely recognized. When had his shoulders begun to stoop? When had that permanent frown etched itself between his brows? Pull yourself together, Warren, he told his reflection. She's not Martha. She's never going to be Martha. She's just help. He'd cleaned the house as best he could, though his efforts had mostly involved shoving clutter into closets and beating the worst of the dust from the furniture. The spare bedroom he couldn't bring himself to prepare. The room he'd shared with Martha had fresh sheets on the narrow bed. He'd even picked some wildflowers for the kitchen table, though they looked pathetic in the cracked vase already wilting in the heat. The ride to town took an hour in the wagon. The horses, sensing his nervousness, perhaps were skittish and difficult. Or maybe it was the approaching storm. Clouds had been building on the horizon all morning, promising rain that would probably never come. Wyoming was good at false promises. Willow Creek barely deserved the name town. A main street of perhaps a dozen buildings, wooden structures that looked ready to blow away in the next strong wind. The general store, the saloon, the church that doubled as the schoolhouse, Doc Morrison's office, the sheriff's office that was usually empty since Sheriff Collins preferred fishing to law enforcement, and the train depot at the far end of the street. As Caleb tied the horses to the hitching post outside the depot, he became aware of eyes upon him. Mrs. Henderson peered through the general store window. The schoolteacher, Miss Price, had paused in her walk to watch him. Even old Jake at the saloon had stepped onto the porch, beer in hand, at barely noon. "Heard you ordered yourself a bride, Warren," Jake called out, his voice carrying down the street. "Hope she knows what she's getting into." Caleb ignored him but felt heat rise in his face. Of course everyone knew. Privacy was a luxury Willow Creek couldn't afford. Mary Henderson had probably read his mail before delivering it. Her husband Tom had certainly noticed the money wire he'd sent east. By now, every soul in 50 miles knew that the widowed rancher had sent for a mail-order bride. "Afternoon, Caleb." Doc Morrison had appeared at his elbow, medical bag in hand. "Meeting the 2:15 train." "Doc." Caleb nodded curtly. "Good for you, son. Martha wouldn't want you living like a hermit." "Don't." The word came out sharper than intended. "Please, Doc, don't mention her today." The older man's face softened. "Of course, my apologies." He paused, then added, "If you need anything, any advice about, well, my door's always open." Caleb almost laughed. Advice about what? How to speak to a woman he'd bought like a head of cattle. How to share his home with a stranger. How to pretend this was anything other than a business transaction. The train whistle sounded in the distance, and Caleb's stomach clenched. Around him, it seemed the entire town had found reasons to be near the depot. Mrs. Wilkins emerged from the boarding house. She ran ostensibly to sweep her already spotless porch. The Garrett boys lounged against the general store, trying to look casual. Even Reverend Phillips had appeared, Bible in hand, as if divine intervention might be needed. The train came into view, black smoke billowing against the gray sky. The ground trembled beneath its approach, and Caleb had the sudden urge to run, to get on his horse and ride until Wyoming was just a memory, to disappear into the mountains and become one of those wild men people told stories about. But he stood his ground, hands clenched at his sides as the train screamed to a stop. Steam hissed, enveloping the platform in a white cloud that made everything seem like a dream or a nightmare. The conductor appeared first, helping passengers disembark. An elderly couple, probably visiting family, a traveling salesman with his case of wares, a mother with 3 children all crying from the journey. And then she appeared. Caleb's first thought was that there had been a mistake. This couldn't be Anna Foster. This couldn't be the plain practical woman he'd requested. She stood at the top of the train steps, one gloved hand on the rail, surveying the platform like a queen reviewing her subjects. The late afternoon sun breaking through the storm clouds for just a moment caught her hair. Honey-colored waves barely contained beneath a simple bonnet. Her dress was modest dark blue wool appropriate for travel, but it couldn't hide the grace of her figure, the elegant line of her neck, the way she moved with an almost ethereal fluidity. But it was her face that stopped his heart, not because it reminded him of Martha. Martha had been pretty in a comfortable, familiar way. This woman was beautiful in a way that made men write poetry and start wars. High cheekbones, a straight, delicate nose, lips that were full without being sensuous, and eyes. Her eyes found his across the platform, and Caleb felt the impact like a physical blow. They were green, the color of spring grass after rain, but there was something in them that contradicted her beauty. A hardness, a wariness, the eyes of someone who had seen too much, survived too much. She descended the steps with careful dignity, a single carpetbag in her hand. No trunk, no boxes of belongings. Just one bag held with white-knuckled intensity. The platform had gone silent. Every eye was on her, and Caleb could practically hear the thoughts spinning through the minds of his neighbors. This was the mail-order bride. This was what Caleb Warren had summoned to their dusty little town. She approached him with measured steps, stopping at a proper distance. Up close, he could see details that the initial shock had obscured. The dress, while clean and well-maintained, showed signs of repeated mending. The gloves had been darned at the fingertips. The boots peeking from beneath her hem were practical and worn. Beautiful, yes, but not wealthy, not pampered. "Mr. Warren?" Her voice was low-cultured but careful, as if she was measuring each word before releasing it. "Yes, Miss Foster." She inclined her head. "I am Anna Foster." Behind him, someone whistled, probably one of the Garrett boys. Mrs. Henderson gasped audibly. Caleb could feel the town's collective intake of breath. "There must be—" he started, then stopped. What could he say? "There must be a mistake because you're too beautiful. I specifically requested plain and practical." She finished, her chin lifting slightly. "I assure you, Mr. Warren, I am entirely practical. As for plain—" A bitter smile touched her lips. Beauty is a matter of perspective, and often a burden rather than a blessing. He stared at her, unable to form words. The storm clouds had covered the sun again, casting everything in gray shadow, but she seemed to glow with her own light. "Perhaps," she continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "we should discuss this somewhere more private, unless you intend to reject me here in front of your entire town." The vulnerability in that question, quickly hidden behind a mask of composure, jolted him from his stupor. Whatever else she was a woman who had traveled hundreds of miles on the promise of a home, a life, a future. He couldn't humiliate her publicly, no matter how much her appearance alarmed him. "No," he said roughly. "The wagon's this way." He reached for her bag, and their fingers brushed as she released it. The contact sent an unwanted jolt through him, awareness, attraction, everything he'd sworn to avoid. The walk to the wagon felt like a funeral procession. Everyone watched, no one spoke. Anna kept her head high, her gaze fixed straight ahead, but he saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her free hand clenched and unclenched in the folds of her skirt. He helped her into the wagon. She was light as a bird despite her height, and climbed up beside her. The horses, perhaps sensing escape, needed no encouragement to leave town at a brisk trot. They rode in silence for several minutes, the only sounds the creak of wheels and the distant rumble of thunder. Finally, Anna spoke. "You're disappointed." It wasn't a question. "I'm surprised," Caleb admitted. "Your letter said nothing about what?" "My appearance?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Would you have sent the train fare if I'd been honest? If I'd written, "Dear Mr. Warren, I am told I am beautiful, and this has brought me nothing but grief and danger. I seek a husband who wants a worker, not an ornament. I can cook clean, tend gardens and animals. I can read, write, and do figures. I can make soap and candles, preserve food, and mend anything that tears. But yes, I am also cursed with a face that makes men foolish." Would you have responded to that letter? No, he said honestly. I wouldn't have. Then perhaps you understand why I was selective with the truth. Why me? He had to ask. A woman like you. You could have any man. Rich men, handsome men, men who could give you silk dresses and servants and... Stop. The word cracked like a whip. You know nothing about women like me. Nothing about what we can or cannot have. They rode in silence again, but this time it was charged with unspoken things. The storm was moving closer, wind picking up, sending dust devils spinning across the road. What are you running from? The question escaped before he could stop it. She turned to look at him fully for the first time since they'd left town. The same thing you are, Mr. Warren, the past. He wanted to deny it, to say he wasn't running from anything, but the lie died in his throat. They were both refugees, it seemed, seeking shelter in this arranged union. The house isn't much, he said, finally feeling the need to lower her expectations. It needs work. The ranch is struggling, the drought. It's been hard. I'm not afraid of hard work. The town, they'll talk. They're already talking. Let them. I won't. He struggled for words. This is a business arrangement. I want to be clear about that. I need help with the ranch, nothing more. Good, she said firmly. That's all I want too. A roof over my head, food to eat, and honest work. Nothing more. But even as she said it, even as he nodded his agreement, Caleb knew they were both lying. Not about what they wanted, that was true enough, but about what would happen when you put a lonely man and a mysterious woman under the same roof with the Wyoming winter approaching and nowhere to run from each other or themselves. The first drops of rain began to fall as they turned onto the ranch road. Not enough to break the drought, just enough to turn the dust to mud. Anna pulled her shawl tighter, but didn't complain. The house came into view and Caleb watched her face from the corner of his eye. She surveyed it with those remarkable green eyes, taking in every broken board, every sagging line, every sign of neglect. It has good bones, she said finally. That's what matters. Everything else can be fixed. Can it? He wasn't talking about the house anymore. She looked at him, and for a moment the mask slipped. He saw exhaustion, fear, determination, and something else, hope, maybe fragile as a candle flame in the wind. We'll have to try, won't we? He pulled the wagon up to the porch just as the sky opened up. They ran for cover. Caleb grabbing her bag, Anna holding her skirts. They stood on the porch, breathless rain falling in sheets beyond the roof's protection. Welcome to your new home, Miss Foster, he said, opening the door. She stepped inside, water dripping from her bonnet, and looked around the dim interior. He saw it through her eyes, the dust, the neglect, the absence of anything warm or welcoming. But instead of disappointment, she nodded once decisively. First things first, she said, already rolling up her sleeves. This place needs a proper cleaning, and Mr. Warren, you need a proper meal. When did you last eat something that wasn't beans or salt pork? He couldn't remember. That's what I thought. Show me the kitchen and the pantry, and if you have coffee, start a pot. We're going to need it. As she moved through his house, their house now, he supposed, touching surfaces, opening cupboards, assessing the damage, and planning the repair, Caleb felt something shift inside him. Not attraction, though, that was there despite his best efforts to suppress it. Not affection, certainly not love. But something else. The first stirring of life in a place that had been dead for 3 years. Anna Foster was not what he'd asked for. She was beautiful when he'd wanted plain mysterious, when he'd wanted simple complicated, when he'd wanted easy. But as she stood in his kitchen, hands on her hips, surveying the battlefield she was about to engage, he thought that maybe, just maybe, she was what he needed. Mr. Warren, she said, not looking at him, there's a bedroom at the end of the hall. I assume that's where I'll be staying. Yes, I
I prepared it for you." "Thank you." She turned to face him, and there was something almost like amusement in her eyes. "And don't look so terrified. I promise I'm much more dangerous with a mop than with my face." Despite himself, despite everything, Caleb almost smiled. The rain continued to fall, not enough to save the dying grass, but enough to wash some of the dust from the windows. As Anna bustled around the kitchen, bringing order from chaos with an efficiency that was indeed entirely practical, Caleb sat at the table and watched.
She'd found an apron somewhere, probably Martha's tucked in some drawer, and tied it around her waist. She'd removed her bonnet, and her hair, despite her attempts to keep it pinned, was beginning to escape in small rebellious curls. "Don't just sit there," she said without turning around. "If we're to be business partners, you'll need to tell me about the business. How many head of cattle? How many horses? What crops do you plant, and when? Who are your neighbors, and which ones can be trusted? What does the ranch need most urgently besides rain?" So, he told her. Surprised by her questions, which showed more understanding of ranch life than he'd expected, he found himself explaining the challenges of the past 3 years. The drought that had killed the wheat, the disease that had taken half the cattle the neighbors who'd offered to buy him out for a fraction of what the land was worth. "Vultures," she said succinctly, slicing potatoes she'd found in the pantry. "They see weakness and circle. We'll show them they're mistaken. She paused, knife in hand. "Unless you prefer to face them alone." "No," he said quietly. "No, we is good." She nodded and returned to her work. Within an hour, she had produced a meal that, while simple, was the best thing he'd eaten in months. Beef stew with actual vegetables, biscuits that were light instead of hard as rocks, coffee that didn't taste like tar. They ate in silence, but it was a comfortable silence, the kind that exists between people who understand that not everything needs words. As night fell and the rain tapered to a drizzle, Anna stood. "I'll clean up, then retire if that's acceptable. It's been a long journey. I'll help." "No." She said it firmly but not unkindly. "You've had a shock today, Mr. Warren. Not the wife you ordered, I know. Take some time to adjust. Tomorrow we'll start properly." He wanted to protest that she wasn't his wife, just, what an employee? A business partner. But the words tangled in his throat. "Good night, Miss Foster." "Good night, Mr. Warren." He sat by the dying fire long after she'd disappeared into the spare room, listening to the sounds of her moving about, preparing for bed, in a strange house with a strange man just walls away. He heard the bed creak as she settled into it, then silence. Caleb remained in his chair staring at the embers, trying to reconcile what had happened with what he'd planned. He'd wanted safe. He'd wanted simple. He'd wanted someone who wouldn't disturb the careful emptiness he'd cultivated since Martha's death. Instead, he'd gotten Anna Foster with her green eyes full of secrets and her beautiful face that would set the whole town talking. Anna Foster, who spoke like an educated woman, but worked like someone who'd known hardship. Anna Foster, who was running from something or someone, just as he was running from the memory of love and loss. A coyote howled in the distance, answered by another, then another. The pack was hunting, driven by hunger and instinct. Caleb knew the feeling. He'd been hungry for 3 years, not for food, but for something he couldn't name. Company purpose. A reason to wake up beyond mere survival. He stood joint stiff from sitting too long and moved to the window. The clouds had cleared, revealing stars so bright they hurt to look at. Martha had loved the stars. She'd known their names, their stories had pointed them out to him on summer nights when they'd sat on the porch planning their future. "I'm sorry, Martha," he whispered to the darkness. "I know she's not what we discussed, but the ranch, I can't do it alone anymore." There was no answer, of course. There never was. Martha was gone, buried in the small cemetery outside town, her grave marked by a simple stone that read, "Martha Warren, beloved wife, 1862 to 1889. He moved through the house, checking locks from habit more than necessity. When he passed the spare room, Anna's room. Now he paused. No light showed beneath the door, no sound emerged. But he knew she was awake. Something about the quality of the silence told him she was lying in that narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what she'd gotten herself into. Join the club, he thought grimly. In his own room, he sat on the bed he'd shared with Martha and pulled off his boots. The wedding photograph on the dresser caught his eye, him looking young and terrified, Martha serene and lovely in her borrowed dress. They'd been so certain then that love was enough that they could weather any storm together. They'd been wrong. Love wasn't enough when fever came calling. Love couldn't stop the convulsions, the burning heat, the final rattling breath. Love could only stand by and watch and howl at the unfairness of it all. He lay down fully clothed, not bothering to pull back the covers. Tomorrow Anna would probably insist on washing all the bedding. She'd probably insist on a lot of things. Already he could feel the changes beginning like ice cracking on a frozen river when spring finally comes. But spring was dangerous. Spring meant floods when the snow melted too fast. Spring meant tender green shoots that could still be killed by a late frost. Spring meant hope, and hope was the cruelest emotion of all. Still, as he drifted toward sleep, he found himself thinking not of Martha, but of green eyes and honey-colored hair, of a woman who'd traveled hundreds of miles on nothing but a promise and determination. Anna Foster might not be the bride he'd ordered, but she was the one who'd shown up. In the harsh mathematics of frontier life, that counted for something. The last thing he heard before sleep took him was the sound of footsteps in the room next door, Anna pacing 3 steps to the window, 3 steps back. Even her restlessness had a rhythm to it, a purpose. Tomorrow she'd probably attack the house like a general planning a campaign. She'd probably disturb every dusty corner, every carefully preserved memorial to the past. Part of him dreaded it. Part of him, a part he didn't want to acknowledge, was curious to see what would happen when Anna Foster's particular brand of beautiful practicality collided with his determined desolation. The coyotes howled again, closer this time. Hunting. Always hunting. Aren't we all, Caleb thought, and surrendered to the darkness. The rooster's crow pierced the pre-dawn darkness, but Caleb was already awake, had been for an hour listening to the sounds of movement in the kitchen. Anna Foster, it seemed, didn't believe in sleeping past 4 in the morning. He could hear her stoking the fire, the clatter of pans, the pump handle squeaking as she drew water. Part of him wanted to stay in bed to avoid the awkwardness of their first full day together, but the smell of coffee and something else bacon drew him from his room. She was at the stove, her back to him, that honey-colored hair already pinned up tight, wearing the same dark blue dress from yesterday, but with Martha's apron over it. The sight stopped him cold. For a heartbeat in the dim morning light, he could almost pretend, "Good morning, Mr. Warren." She didn't turn around. "Breakfast will be ready in 10 minutes. There's hot water if you want to wash up." Her voice shattered the dangerous illusion. This wasn't Martha. Martha had hummed while she cooked, had turned to greet him with a smile and a kiss. Anna Foster was all business, efficient, and distant as a bank clerk. "Where did you find bacon?" He moved to the wash basin she'd set out, noting that it was clean for the first time in months. "Bottom of your smokehouse wrapped in cheesecloth. Nearly forgotten, I'd guess. You also had eggs buried in sawdust that were still good, though barely. We need to discuss your food storage methods, Mr. Warren. You're wasting resources through poor management." He bristled at the criticism but couldn't argue. She was right. He'd let everything slip these past 3 years, surviving on the minimum, letting good food spoil while he ate beans and hardtack like some prospector. "There's also the matter of your accounts." She continued flipping eggs with practiced ease. "I noticed the ledgers on your desk. When did you last balance them?" "That's not your concern." She turned then, fixing him with those green eyes that seemed to see too much. "If we're business partners, as you insisted yesterday, then the business is precisely my concern. Unless you'd prefer I limit myself to cooking and cleaning like a hired girl." The challenge in her voice was unmistakable. She was testing boundaries, establishing her position. He could push back, insist on maintaining control, keep her in the role of housekeeper. But something about the way she stood there, spatula in hand, like a weapon chin raised, despite the uncertainty he could see beneath her composure, made him reconsider. "The ledgers are a mess," he admitted. "Haven't had the heart for figures lately. Then after breakfast, you'll show me the entire operation. Every asset, every debt, every problem. We can't fix what we don't fully understand." She turned back to the stove, the matter apparently settled. Caleb found himself oddly relieved. It had been so long since anyone had taken charge of anything in his life, since he'd had to do more than simply endure each day. They ate breakfast in relative quiet, but Anna had a way of filling silence with purpose. She made notes on a piece of brown paper, things needed from town repairs that couldn't wait questions about the livestock. Her handwriting was elegant, educated, another mystery to add to the growing list. "You write like a schoolteacher," he observed. Her hand stilled for just a moment. "My father believed in education, even for daughters." "Was he a teacher then?" "No." The word was flat final, a door closing on that line of inquiry. After breakfast, she insisted on the tour he'd promised. They started with the barn, where she examined each horse with knowing hands, checking teeth and hooves, running her fingers along their legs, feeling for heat or swelling. "This mare's in foal," she announced, her hand on Buttercup's swollen side. "Did you know?" He hadn't. Martha had always handled the breeding records, and he'd let that slip too. "When was she covered?" I'm not sure. Maybe spring." Anna made another note. "She'll foal within the month, I'd guess. We'll need to prepare a stall, gather supplies. Do you have a veterinary kit?" They moved through the property like an inspection team, Anna cataloging everything with those sharp green eyes. The chicken coop earned a frown. Foxes will get through those gaps, and the garden plot made her actually stop and stare. "This was beautiful once," she said softly, kneeling to touch the dry earth. "Someone loved this garden. My wife." The words came out rough. "Martha, she died 3 years ago." Anna stood dusting her hands. "I'm sorry for your loss." She paused, then added, "Would you mind if I tried to restore it? Gardens have a way of holding memories in the soil. Sometimes they just need someone to wake them up again." The question hit him unexpectedly hard. Martha's garden tended by another woman's hands. But the way Anna had phrased it about memories in the soil, about waking things up. "If you want to try," he managed. They were examining the fence line when the riders appeared on the horizon. 3 men moving fast, raising dust despite yesterday's rain. Caleb recognized them immediately, the Hayworth brothers, owners of the largest ranch in the county, and their foreman, a mean piece of work named Dutch Collins. "Trouble?" Anna asked quietly, noting his tension. "Maybe. The Hayworths have been trying to buy me out." "Ah, the vultures you mentioned." The riders pulled up in a cloud of dust, their horses dancing with excess energy. Robert Hayworth, the elder brother, tipped his hat mockingly. "Warren, heard you got yourself a new woman." "Miss Foster," Caleb said carefully. "These are the Hayworth brothers, Robert and James, and their foreman Dutch." Robert's eyes traveled over Anna with an appreciation that made Caleb's hands clench. "Miss Foster. Well, well. The whole town's talking about you, ma'am. Quite a stir you've caused." "How fascinating for them," Anna replied coolly. "They must have very little else to occupy their time." James Hayworth laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. "She's got spine, Warren. Question is, will that be enough when winter comes? When the cattle start dying and the wells run dry?" "Our wells are fine," Caleb said. "For now." Robert leaned forward in his saddle. "But that creek that feeds them runs through our land first. Been thinking about damming it up, making ourselves a nice reservoir." The threat was clear. Water rights were life and death in Wyoming. If the Hayworths cut off his water supply, that would be illegal, Anna said suddenly. "The water rights were established when this ranch was homesteaded. I assume you have the documentation, Mr. Warren?" All 4 men turned to stare at her. "What would you know about water rights?" Dutch spoke for the first time, his voice dismissive. "I know that interfering with established water rights is a federal offense under the Desert Land Act of 1877. I know that the territorial court in Cheyenne takes such matters very seriously. And I know that men who make threats they can't follow through on often find themselves looking foolish." The silence stretched taut as a bowstring. Robert Hayworth's face had gone red, whether from anger or embarrassment, Caleb couldn't tell. "You brought yourself a lawyer, Warren?" he asked finally. "I brought myself a partner," Caleb replied, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. "Now, if you gentlemen have business here, state it. Otherwise, you're trespassing." Robert smiled, but it was all teeth, no warmth. "Just being neighborly. Wanted to welcome the lady to Willow Creek, ma'am." He touched his hat again, the gesture somehow making a mockery of courtesy. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of each other." They wheeled their horses and galloped off, but not before Dutch looked back, his eyes lingering on Anna in a way that made Caleb want to reach for the rifle he wasn't carrying. "Pleasant neighbors," Anna observed once they were gone. "They want this land. Been after it since Martha died. They figure a man alone can't hold a ranch." "But you're not alone now." She said it matter-of-factly, already walking toward the next section of fence. "Do you have those water rights documents?" "Somewhere. Maybe." She stopped, turned to face him fully. "Mr. Warren, I need you to understand something. I didn't travel 800 miles to fail. Whatever the Hayworths think they can do, whatever anyone thinks about me or us or this arrangement, they're wrong. I've faced worse than provincial bullies with delusions of power. But I need you to work with me, not just alongside me. Can you do that?" There was something in her voice, a hint of steel, that hadn't been there before. This wasn't the desperate woman who'd stood on the train platform yesterday worried about rejection. This was someone else, someone who'd fought battles he could only guess at. "Yes," he said. "Yes, I can do that." "Good. Then let's find those documents and anything else related to the ranch's legal standing. If the Hayworths want to fight, we'll be prepared." They spent the rest of the morning in his office, really just a corner of the main room where he'd shoved a desk and forgotten about it. Anna attacked the chaos with the same efficiency she had shown in the kitchen, sorting papers into piles, asking sharp questions about debts and assets, making more of her endless notes. "You're not as bad off as you think," she announced finally. "There's debt, yes, but the land itself is valuable. The cattle that survived are good stock. With proper management and a bit of luck with weather, this ranch could be profitable again within 2 years. You sound very confident for someone who's been here less than a day. Numbers don't lie, Mr. Warren. People do, circumstances change, but mathematics is constant." She paused, studying a receipt. "You've been selling cattle for half what they're worth." "Had to take what I could get." "No, you had to take what you thought you could get. There's a difference." She set the papers aside, folded her hands in her lap. "May I ask you something personal?" He nodded, wary. "Do you want to save this ranch, or are you just going through the motions because you don't know what else to do?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Did he want to save it? This place where he'd been happy, where he'd built a life with Martha, where that life had ended in fever and gravestone. "I don't know," he admitted. "Some days I think I should just let the Hayworths have it, take their money and disappear." "And go where to do what?" Her voice was gentle now. "Mr. Warren, Caleb, running doesn't end the grief. It just makes you carry it somewhere else." Speaking from experience, she stood abruptly. "I should start on lunch, and that chicken coop needs fixing before nightfall if we want to keep any chickens." But as she moved toward the kitchen, he caught her arm. The contact was electric, unexpected, and they both froze. Through the fabric of her sleeve, he could feel her pulse racing. "Anna." Her name felt strange on his tongue. "Whatever you're running from, you're safe here. I want you to know that." She looked down at his hand on her arm, then up at his face. For a moment, the mask slipped entirely. He saw fear, hope, and something else, a loneliness that matched his own. "Nobody's ever really safe, Caleb. But thank you." She pulled away gently, and he let her go. As she busied herself in the kitchen, he returned to the ledgers, but his mind wasn't on numbers. It was on the way she'd said his name, the way her pulse had jumped under his fingers, the way she'd looked at him like he might actually be someone who could protect her. Dangerous thoughts. He'd asked for plain and practical specifically to avoid such complications. But Anna Foster, with her beauty and her mysteries and her surprising competence, was already complicating everything. The afternoon brought unexpected visitors. Caleb was repairing the chicken coop while Anna worked in the garden plot, trying to determine what might be salvageable when a buggy appeared on the road. This time, he recognized the occupants with relief: Reverend Phillips and his wife Margaret, along with their daughter Lucy. "Afternoon, Caleb," the Reverend called out, helping his wife down from the buggy. "Thought we'd come welcome your Miss Foster to the community." Anna emerged from the garden dirt on her hands and a smudge on her cheek that somehow only made her more beautiful. Margaret Phillips, a kind woman in her 50s who'd tried repeatedly to mother Caleb after Martha's death, stepped forward with a warm smile. "My dear, I'm Margaret
Phillips. This is my husband, Reverend Phillips, and our daughter, Lucy. Welcome to Willow Creek." Anna wiped her hands on her apron before accepting Margaret's offered handshake. "Thank you. That's very kind." "We've brought a pie," Lucy said shyly. She was 17, pretty in an unremarkable way, and had been making eyes at Caleb for the past year despite their age difference. Now she stared at Anna with a mixture of awe and dismay. How thoughtful. Anna accepted the pie with apparent pleasure.
"Would you like to come in for coffee?" The Phillips family exchanged glances. Clearly, they'd expected to find scandal or impropriety. Instead, here was Anna looking every inch the respectable ranch woman, despite her beauty inviting them in for coffee like any proper hostess. The visit was awkward but not unpleasant. Margaret Phillips had a gift for conversation, filling potential silences with church news and town gossip. Anna played her part perfectly, asking appropriate questions, showing interest without seeming nosy, deflecting personal inquiries with practiced ease. "Will we see you at church on Sunday?" the Reverend asked as they prepared to leave. Anna glanced at Caleb, who hadn't been to church since Martha's funeral. "Of course," she answered for both of them. "We'd be delighted." After they left, Caleb confronted her. "I don't go to church." "You do now." Her tone brooked no argument. "If we're going to make this work, we need the community's acceptance. That starts with church attendance. Besides," she added with a slight smile, "it will give the gossips a chance to get used to me. Better to face them all at once than piecemeal." She was right, of course, but the thought of sitting in that church where he'd married Martha, where he'd listened to her funeral sermon. "I'll make you a deal," Anna said, perhaps reading his distress. "You endure church, and I'll handle the social obligations that come with it. The women's auxiliary, the church socials, all of it. You won't have to make small talk or pretend to be cheerful, just show up and look respectable." Deal. That evening, after a dinner of roasted chicken, one of the older hens that had stopped laying and vegetables she'd somehow coaxed from the garden, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. It was the first time Caleb had sat there since Martha died, but Anna had insisted. "Porches are for sitting," she'd said. "Otherwise, they're just expensive awnings." "Can I ask you something?" Caleb said, breaking the comfortable silence. "You can ask." "That first night you were pacing, 3 steps to the window, 3 steps back. Why 3 steps?" She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then softly, "It was the width of the room I had back home. I got used to pacing in that space when I couldn't sleep. Habit, I suppose." "What kept you awake? The same thing that keeps you sitting by dying fires instead of sleeping, I imagine." They sat quietly again, watching the stars emerge. The coyotes started their nightly chorus, and somewhere an owl hooted. "Tell me about Martha," Anna said suddenly. "Why?" "Because she's still here, in every corner of this house and that garden, in the way you flinch when I wear her apron. If we're going to live here together, even as business partners, I need to know who I'm sharing the space with." So he told her. Not everything, not the intimate details of their marriage, but the broad strokes. How they'd met at a barn raising. How she'd made him court her for a full year before agreeing to marry him. How she'd loved books and hated snakes and could make anything grow in that garden. "She sounds wonderful," Anna said when he finished. She was. "You were lucky to have that kind of love." "Were you," he asked carefully, "ever in love?" Her silence was answer enough. Finally, she stood, wrapping her shawl tighter. "It's getting cold. Good night, Caleb." But as she reached the door, she paused. "The answer is yes. Once. But love and luck don't always go together." She disappeared inside, leaving him alone with the stars and the coyotes and the ghost of his wife, who seemed somehow a little less present than she had the night before. The week passed in a blur of work and adjustment. Anna attacked the ranch's problems with a determination that both impressed and exhausted Caleb. She mended fences, literally and figuratively charming the neighboring ranchers' wives when they came to call trading preserving recipes and gossip, while gleaning information about cattle prices and water rights. She fixed the chicken coop so thoroughly that not even a mouse could get through. She replanted the garden with seeds she'd somehow procured from Mrs. Henderson at the general store, on credit with the promise of vegetables in trade come harvest.
She even started breaking one of the younger horses to saddle, showing a skill with animals that suggested yet another chapter in her mysterious past. But it was her handling of the ranch's finances that truly amazed him. She'd found errors in his favor at the bank, negotiated better terms with suppliers, and even discovered that the Hayworths had been illegally grazing their cattle on his land for months. "We could charge them grazing fees," she suggested over dinner one night, retroactively. They'd never pay.
No, but the threat might make them think twice about their water rights scheme. She was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers, thinking 3 moves ahead, setting up defenses and offenses he wouldn't have considered. Sunday came too quickly. Anna had somehow altered one of Martha's dresses to fit her. She was taller and slimmer than Martha had been and looked respectable, if not plain. There was no hiding her beauty, but she'd tried to minimize it, pulling her hair back severely, choosing the most modest dress, avoiding any jewelry or decoration. "You're nervous," Caleb observed as they prepared to leave for church. "Aren't you?" "Terrified," he admitted, which earned him a small smile. "Then we'll be terrified together. Remember, chin up, back straight. Give them nothing to criticize except my face, which they'll criticize anyway." The church was full when they arrived, fuller than usual, Caleb suspected. Every head turned as they entered, conversation stopping mid-sentence. Anna's hand tightened on his arm, but her expression remained serene. They took a pew near the back, ignoring the whispers that followed them like rustling leaves. Reverend Phillips, bless him, began the service without any reference to the drama unfolding in his congregation. During the hymns, Caleb discovered Anna had a beautiful voice, clear and true. She sang without self-consciousness, as if the music transported her somewhere else entirely. He found himself watching her instead of the hymnal, noting the way her face softened, the way her fingers relaxed on the book. The sermon was about finding strength in community, about the importance of supporting one another through trials. Caleb wondered if the Reverend had chosen it specifically for them, but the message seemed to resonate throughout the congregation. After the service came the real test, the social gauntlet. The congregation gathered outside ostensibly for fellowship, but really for gossip and judgment. Anna faced it like a general facing battle. "Mrs. Henderson, how lovely to see you. Thank you again for the seeds. I'll have vegetables for you by August, I promise." "Miss Price, good morning. Caleb tells me you're the school teacher. How many students do you have?"
"Mrs. Morrison, that's a beautiful brooch. Was it your mother's?" She deflected, redirected, charmed, and maneuvered through the crowd with a grace that left Caleb stunned. By the time they left, she'd secured 3 invitations to tea, 2 offers to help with the garden, and a promise from Tom Morrison to look at their broken plow. "How did you do that?" Caleb asked as they drove home. "Practice," she said wearily, "and the knowledge that people generally want to be liked more than they want to be suspicious. Give them a reason to approve, and most will take it." "Most?" She glanced back toward town. "There are always exceptions. The Hayworth brothers, for instance. And that woman with the purple hat, Mrs. Garrett, she'd love to see me fail. But that's manageable. You can't win everyone, you just need to win enough." That afternoon, she collapsed on the porch, exhausted from the performance. Caleb brought her coffee. He'd learned she preferred it to tea, and sat beside her. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what? For doing all that. For facing them. For making it easier for me." She looked at him, then really looked at him, and he felt that dangerous awareness spark between them again. "We're partners, remember? Your battles are my battles now." "And yours?" he asked. "Are your battles mine?" Her expression closed off. "I hope not. I truly hope not." That night he heard her pacing again, 3 steps to the window, 3 steps back, and wondered what ghosts kept her awake. Whatever she was running from, it haunted her as surely as Martha haunted him. But where his ghost was made of love and loss, hers seemed made of fear and flight. Monday brought a new crisis. Caleb woke to find Anna in the barn tending to Buttercup, who was clearly in distress. "She's foaling," Anna said tersely. "But something's wrong. The foal's turned wrong." They worked together for hours, Anna's knowledge of horses proving invaluable. She guided his hands, showing him how to feel for the foal's position, how to gently turn it. Her composure never cracked, even when Buttercup's pain became acute, even when it seemed they might lose both mare and foal. Finally, with a rush of fluid and a triumphant whinny from Buttercup, the foal slid free. a colt dark as midnight with a white star on his forehead. He's beautiful. Anna breathed, her face flushed with exertion and triumph. You saved them both, Caleb said, amazed. We saved them. She was kneeling in the straw, helping the colt find his feet, and in that moment, covered in sweat and birth fluids, she was more beautiful than ever. Not despite the mess, but because of it, because she'd rolled up her sleeves and done what needed doing without hesitation or complaint. What should we name him? Caleb asked. That's your decision. No, you delivered him. You should name him. She considered watching the colt take his first shaky steps. Hope, she said finally. Let's call him Hope. It was only later, as they cleaned up and settled the new mother and baby, that Caleb realized the significance of the name. Hope, the thing Emily Dickinson said, perched in the soul and sang without words. The thing both of them had perhaps lost, but were slowly, carefully finding again. That evening, as they ate dinner in companionable quiet, both exhausted from the day's drama, Caleb found himself really looking at Anna. Not at her beauty, though that was undeniable, but at her, the woman who'd faced down the Hayworths, charmed the church congregation, and delivered a foal without flinching. The woman who paced 3 steps in the night and named a colt Hope. What? She asked, noticing his scrutiny. Nothing, just, thank you for being here. She smiled, then a real smile that reached her eyes. Thank you for letting me stay. The moment stretched between them, fragile and full of possibility. Then the coyotes started their nightly song, and Anna stood to clear the dishes, and the moment passed. But something had shifted. Some wall had cracked, and Caleb thought that maybe, just maybe, they were both a little less alone than they'd been that morning. As the second week began, a routine emerged. Anna rose before dawn to start breakfast and tend the chickens. Caleb handled the cattle and heavy repairs. They worked the garden together in the evenings when the heat had passed. Meals were shared in increasingly comfortable conversation, and the house began to lose its tomb-like quality. Anna had a way of bringing life to spaces simply by inhabiting them. Fresh flowers appeared on tables. Curtains were washed and mended. The windows were opened to let in air and light. Even the dust seemed less oppressive, as if it too recognized her authority. But it was the small things that unsettled Caleb most. The way she hummed while she worked, not Martha's hymns, but something darker, more complex. The way she knew exactly how he took his coffee after only a few days. The way she could sense his moods and adjust accordingly, giving him space when he needed it, drawing him out, when solitude threatened to become brooding. Wednesday brought rain, real rain, not the teasing drizzle of her arrival, but a proper soaking that had the dry earth drinking greedily. They stood on the porch watching it fall, both grinning like children. It's a sign, Anna said. Of what? That things can change. That what seems dead might just be dormant. She was talking about the ranch, the garden, the grass that would green with this water. But Caleb heard something else in her words. Something about themselves, about the possibility of life after loss. The rain continued through the night, drumming on the roof like nervous fingers. Caleb lay awake listening to it, and to the silence from Anna's room. No pacing tonight. Perhaps the rain soothed her the way it soothed the parched earth. When thunder rolled across the plains, he found himself wondering if she was frightened alone in that narrow bed in a strange house. Martha had always curled against him during storms, seeking comfort in his warmth. But Anna Foster didn't seem like the type to seek comfort from anyone. Morning brought mud and miracles. The garden Anna had been coaxing back to life showed green shoots everywhere, as if the seeds had been waiting just beneath the surface for permission to grow. She stood in the drizzle without a coat, her face turned up to the gray sky, and for the first time since her arrival, she looked truly peaceful. "You'll catch your death, Caleb called from the porch. "No," she said softly, not moving. "This is life, not death. Can't you feel it?" He could actually. The air smelled different, alive with the scent of wet earth and growing things. The whole ranch seemed to exhale after holding its breath for months. She finally came inside, water dripping from her hair, her dress clinging in ways that made him look away. "We should go to town today," she announced, wringing out her skirts. "The rain will have everyone in good spirits. It's the perfect time to negotiate better prices at the store." "You want to use the weather to haggle?" "I want to use everything to our advantage, Caleb. That's how we survive."
She changed into dry clothes, another of Martha's dresses she'd altered, and they took the wagon to town. The road was treacherous with mud, but the horses seemed to share the general mood of celebration. All of Willow Creek had emerged to rejoice in the rain. Children played in puddles while their mothers scolded half-heartedly. Men gathered outside the saloon discussing what this might mean for crops and cattle. At Henderson's store, Anna worked her particular magic. She chatted with Mrs. Henderson about preserving techniques while subtly negotiating credit terms. She admired Mr. Henderson's new shipment of fabric while securing a bulk discount on flour and sugar. By the time they left, their wagon was full of supplies, and they owed less than Caleb had paid for half as much the month before. "How do you do that?" he asked as they loaded the last sack. "People want to feel clever," Anna explained. "Let them think they're getting the better of the deal even when they're not. Mrs. Henderson thinks she's overcharged me for the fabric, which I don't need, but undercharged for the flour, which we desperately need. Everyone's happy." They were preparing to leave when a commotion erupted near the saloon. Dutch Collins, the Hayworth's foreman, had apparently been drinking since dawn and was now loudly holding court about uppity women who don't know their place. "Just ignore him," Caleb said, but Anna had gone very still beside him. Dutch spotted them and stumbled over reeking of whiskey. "Well, well, the beautiful bride and her broken-down rancher," he leered at Anna. "Honey, when you get tired of playing house with Warren, you come find me. I'll show you what a real man can do." "Anna, let's go," Caleb said, but she didn't move. "Mr. Collins," she said, her voice carrying that dangerous quietness Caleb was beginning to recognize. "I believe you're drunk." "So what if I am?" Dutch swayed closer. "Doesn't change the facts. You're too good for him, sweetheart. Pretty thing like you needs a man who can appreciate her properly." "Like you." Anna's smile was sharp as glass. "A man who drinks before noon, who works for others because he can't manage his own land, who thinks violence makes him strong, when it only reveals his weakness." Dutch's face went red. "You little—" He reached for her, whether to grab or strike. Caleb never knew. His fist connected with Dutch's jaw before he'd made a conscious decision to throw it. The bigger man went down hard, splashing mud everywhere. "You stay away from her," Caleb said, standing over Dutch's prone form. "You come near her again, and I'll kill you." He meant it. The certainty of it shocked him. He'd never been a violent man, had never wanted to be. But something about Anna, about protecting Anna, had awakened something primal in him. Dutch struggled to his feet, supported by two of his drinking companions. "This isn't over, Warren. The Hayworths won't stand for this." "Then the Hayworths can come talk to me themselves," Caleb replied. "Now get out of my sight." They drove home in tense silence. Anna hadn't said a word since the confrontation. Caleb's knuckles throbbed, and he suspected he'd broken something, but the pain felt distant, unimportant. Finally, as they pulled up to the ranch, Anna spoke. "You shouldn't have done that. He had no right to talk to you that way. Men like Dutch Collins always think they have rights to women like me." Her voice was bitter. "Violence just confirms their beliefs. So I should have let him grab you." She turned to face him fully. "I've been handling men like Dutch Collins my whole life, Caleb. I don't need a protector." "Maybe not," he admitted. "But you have one anyway." Something shifted in her expression. "Why?" "Because you're—" He struggled for words. "You're here. You're helping. You're my partner." "Is that all I am?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to address. Caleb looked at her. Really looked at her. Mud splattered her dress from Dutch's fall. Her hair was coming loose from its pins. Her green eyes held a challenge and something else, something vulnerable. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I don't know what you are to me, Anna. I just know that when he threatened you, I wanted to tear him apart." She looked away. "That's not who you are, Caleb. Don't let me turn you into someone you're not." "Maybe it's exactly who I am. Maybe I just forgot for a while." That evening she tended to his bruised knuckles with surprising gentleness. Her fingers were soft on his damaged hand, spreading salve with careful precision. Neither spoke about the electricity that sparked every time she touched him. "My father was a gambler," she said suddenly, not looking up from her work. "That's how I learned about business, about reading people.
He taught me that everyone tells little signs that show what they're thinking, what they want. What happened to him? He lost. She wrapped his hand with clean cloth. He lost everything.
Our house, our reputation, our future. And then he lost me. Lost you how? She stood abruptly. Your hand should heal fine. Try not to punch anyone else for a few days. But Caleb caught her wrist as she turned away. Anna, what did he lose you to? She looked down at his hand on her wrist. The good hand, not the bandaged one. To a man who held his debts. A man who thought I was part of the payment. The pieces clicked into place. The wariness, the fierce independence, the running. Did you marry him? No. She pulled free gently. I ran. I've been running ever since. Is he looking for you? Probably. Men like him don't like losing what they think they own. What's his name? Why? So you can protect me from him too. She shook her head. Caleb, I came here for a new start. Let me have it. He wanted to push to demand answers to know what enemy might come calling, but the plea in her eyes stopped him. All right, but Anna, if he comes, we'll deal with it then. That night the pacing resumed. 3 steps to the window, 3 steps back. Caleb lay in his bed listening, wanting to go to her, but knowing she wouldn't welcome the intrusion. Instead, he stared at the ceiling and thought about the kind of man who would treat a woman like property, who would chase her across the country to claim her. He thought about what he'd do if such a man showed up at his ranch. The violence he'd felt toward Dutch Collins was nothing compared to what he felt now thinking about Anna's past. The next few days passed in careful normalcy. They worked the ranch, tended the garden, cared for the animals. Hope the colt grew stronger daily, following his mother around the pasture on increasingly steady legs. The rain had brought grass and the cattle grew fat on it. Even the chickens seemed more productive, laying eggs with enthusiasm. Sunday came again, and this time church was less of an ordeal. Anna had established herself the week before, and while people still stared, it was with less hostility. Some of the women even seemed sympathetic, perhaps recognizing a kindred spirit in someone trying to make a life on the unforgiving frontier. After church, Margaret Phillips invited them for Sunday dinner. Caleb wanted to decline, but Anna accepted graciously. The Phillips home was everything the Warren Ranch wasn't. Neat, orderly, filled with the comfortable chatter of family life. Lucy Phillips watched Anna with barely concealed fascination, peppering her with questions about fashion and city life that Anna deflected with practiced ease. You're good with her, Margaret observed as they cleared dishes. The men had retired to the porch to smoke, leaving the women to their traditional domain. She's a sweet girl, Anna replied carefully. She's had her eye on Caleb for some time, Margaret said, watching Anna's reaction. I tried to tell her he wasn't ready, that he was still mourning Martha. And now? Margaret studied her shrewdly. Now I think he's finally waking up. You're good for him, dear. I haven't seen him this alive in 3 years. We're just partners, Mrs. Phillips. Business partners. Of course you are. Margaret's tone was knowing. Just like my husband and I were just friends until the day he kissed me behind the church and changed everything. Anna said nothing, but color rose in her cheeks. On the ride home, Caleb asked, What did Mrs. Phillips say to make you blush? Nothing important, just women's talk. About me. You think very highly of your importance in women's conversations, Mr. Warren. But she was smiling slightly, and he found himself smiling back. It was comfortable, this gentle teasing, this growing ease between them. That comfort shattered 3 days later when riders appeared on the horizon. Not the Hayworths this time, but a single man on a lathered horse riding hard from the east. Anna saw him first. She was in the garden, and Caleb watched her go rigid, the color draining from her face. Get inside, she said quietly. Anna. Please, Caleb, get inside and get your rifle. But it was too late. The rider had seen them, was already turning toward the ranch. As he got closer, Caleb could see he was young, maybe 25, with the soft look of someone who'd never done real work. His clothes were expensive, but trail-worn, and his face was grimly determined. Anna, he called out as he dismounted. Anna Foster. Or should I say Anna Whitmore? I'm not Anna Whitmore, she said steadily. I never was. Your father promised you to me, signed a contract. You're mine by law. So this was him, the creditor who'd thought he could own a woman like a horse or a piece of land. Charles Whitmore looked nothing like Caleb had imagined. He'd expected someone older, harder, more obviously villainous. This boy with his clean hands and desperate eyes seemed almost pitiful. There's no law that makes a woman property, Caleb said, stepping forward. Charles noticed him for the first time. Who are you, see? Caleb Warren, this is my land you're on. And she's your woman. Charles's laugh was bitter. You think you can just take what's mine? I'm no one's woman, Anna said firmly. Charles, you need to leave. There's nothing for you here. You owe me... The young man's composure cracked. Your father owed me $20,000. You were the payment. My father had no right to trade me for his debts. He had every right. You're his daughter, his to dispose of as he saw fit. Caleb stepped between them. That's enough. You need to leave, now. Charles's hand went to the gun at his hip. I'm not leaving without her. Yes, Caleb said calmly, you are, either on your horse or over it. You think you're tough? Some frontier rancher playing at being a hard man. Charles drew his gun, pointing it at Caleb. I've killed men before. No, you haven't. Anna's voice was steady. Charles, you're not a killer. You're a spoiled boy who lost at cards to the wrong man. My father cheated you, I know that, but I'm not going to pay for his sins. You already did pay, Charles said, his gun wavering. Don't you remember that night in Boston when you came to my rooms? Anna's face went white. Caleb felt rage building in his chest. I came to beg you to forgive the debt, Anna said quietly. Nothing more. You came dressed like a woman who knew what she was trading. Charles's voice turned ugly. You drank my champagne, smiled at me, let me believe I was 17 years old. Anna cut him off. I didn't know what you expected. When I realized, I ran. You humiliated me. Everyone knew Richard Foster's beautiful daughter had played me for a fool. So this is about pride, Caleb asked. You chased her across the country because she wounded your ego. It's about what's mine. Charles swung the gun toward Caleb. She owes me one way or another. The shot came from behind Caleb. Charles's gun flew from his hand as he cried out, clutching his bleeding wrist. Anna stood on the porch. Caleb's rifle in her hand, smoke rising from the barrel. The next one won't beat a wound, she said calmly. Leave Charles. Don't come back. Charles cradled his injured hand, staring at Anna with a mixture of shock and rage. You shot me. You actually shot me. You threatened the man I... She stopped, but the unfinished sentence hung in the air. You threatened my partner, my home. I'll do worse if you come back. This isn't over, Charles said, backing toward his horse. I'll get the law involved. I have documents, proof of the debt. And I have proof of attempted kidnapping, Caleb said. Multiple witnesses saw you pull a gun on me and threaten to take Miss Foster by force. Wyoming takes a dim view of such things. Charles managed to mount his horse one-handed, his face twisted with pain and fury. You haven't seen the last of me. Yes, Anna said quietly. We have. Because if you come back, Charles, I'll tell everyone the truth. About your father's opium dens. About your mother's interesting relationship with your so-called uncle. About the fire at your warehouse that happened right after you increased the insurance. Do you really want all that coming to light? Charles went pale. You wouldn't dare. Try me. He wheeled his horse and galloped away, disappearing over the rise. Anna stood frozen for a moment, rifle still raised, then suddenly collapsed to her knees, the gun falling beside her. Caleb reached her in 3 strides, gathering her against him. She was shaking violently, all the strength she'd shown draining away. I shot him, she whispered. I actually shot someone. You saved us both, Caleb said, holding her tighter. You did what you had to do. I've handled guns my father taught me, but I've never actually hurt anyone. Shh, it's all right. He's gone. She pulled back slightly, looking up at him with tear-filled eyes. What if he comes back? What if he brings the law? Then we'll face it together. He cupped her face in his hands. Anna,
You're not alone anymore. Whatever comes, we handle it together." She stared at him for a long moment, then suddenly pressed her lips to his. The kiss was desperate, grateful, and full of fear. Caleb froze for an instant, then kissed her back, pouring all his unspoken feelings into the contact. When they separated, both breathing hard, Anna immediately stood and stepped away. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have—" "Anna." "No." She held up a hand. "We agreed. Business partners. That was just the shock. It didn't mean anything." But her lips were swollen from the kiss, her pupils dilated, and Caleb knew she was lying. It had meant everything. "All right," he said carefully. "If that's what you want, it's what we both need," she corrected, then fled into the house. That night the pacing was worse than ever. Caleb could hear her moving around her room, not just the measured 3 steps, but erratic movement, as if she couldn't find any position that brought comfort. Finally unable to stand it, he knocked on her door. "Anna, can I come in?" Silence, then a quiet, "Yes." She was standing by the window, arms wrapped around herself, staring out at the darkness. She'd let her hair down and it fell in waves past her shoulders. In her white nightgown, she looked like a ghost or an angel or something caught between worlds. "I can't sleep," she said unnecessarily. "Neither can I." He stayed by the door, not trusting himself to get closer. "Are you all right?" "No." The honesty surprised him. "I'm terrified and angry and—" She turned to face him. "And confused. About Charles. About everything. About you." She took a shaky breath. "I came here for safety, for simplicity. A business arrangement with a grieving widower who wanted a plain, practical wife. Instead, I find myself living with a man who makes me feel things I swore I'd never feel again. Anna, don't." She turned back to the window. "Please don't say anything kind or understanding. I can't bear it right now." "What can you bear?" "The truth. Tell me the truth, Caleb. Do you wish I was plain? Do you wish I was Martha?" The questions hit like physical blows. "Sometimes," he admitted. "Sometimes I wish you were plain because then I could think straight around you. And sometimes I wish you were Martha because she was simple to love. But mostly," he took a deep breath, "mostly I'm glad you're you, complicated and beautiful and dangerous to my peace of mind." She made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "I'm going to get you killed. Men like Charles don't give up easily." "Then we'll be ready for him." There is no we, Caleb. We're business partners, remember?" "Is that what you were thinking when you kissed me?" She spun to face him. "That wasn't—" "Don't lie to me, Anna. Not tonight. Not after everything." They stared at each other across the small room. The moonlight silvered her skin, made her eyes look almost black. She was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen, and the most dangerous. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. "Everything," he said honestly. "Nothing. I don't know. I just know that when you kissed me, I felt alive for the first time in 3 years. And when you pulled away, I wanted to follow. You're still in love with your wife." "Yes, and you're still running from your past." "Then what are we doing?" "Surviving," he said simply. "Isn't that enough for now?" She considered this, then nodded slowly. "For now." He started to leave, then paused. "Anna, what you said to Charles about proof of his family's secrets, was that true?" A bitter smile touched her lips. "Every word. My father was a gambler, but he was also a collector of information. He taught me that secrets were better than gold if you knew how to use them. And you know how to use them. I've had to learn." He left her standing by the window, but the pacing didn't resume. Whatever demon had been driving her seemed to have quieted, at least for the night. The next morning they worked in careful coordination, neither mentioning the kiss or the midnight conversation. But something had shifted between them. The awareness that had always been there was now acknowledged, even if not acted upon. Every accidental touch sparked. Every shared glance held weight. They were in the garden when Sheriff Collins arrived. Not Dutch Collins. He was no relation, but Samuel Collins, an older man who took his job seriously when he bothered to show up. "Warren, Miss Foster," he tipped his hat. "Had a complaint from a Mr. Charles Whitmore. Says he was shot on your property."
He drew a gun on us, Caleb said evenly. Ask anyone in town. They'll tell you he came here making threats. That's what I heard. Also heard Miss Foster here is quite a shot. I defended my home, Anna said simply. The sheriff studied them both. Whitmore's claiming you're his legal bride, miss. Says he has papers. Papers saying what? That my father owed him money. That may be true, but there's no paper that makes me property to be traded. That's how I see it, too. The sheriff shifted his weight. Man's gone to the county seat trying to get a judge involved. Might want to prepare yourselves for legal troubles. After he left, Anna sank onto the porch steps. It's starting. The fight I've been running from. Then we fight, Caleb said, sitting beside her. We get a lawyer. We gather witnesses. We use those secrets you mentioned. You do that. Get involved in my mess. Anna, I'm already involved. Have been since the moment you stepped off that train. She looked at him with an expression he couldn't read. I should leave. Disappear before this gets worse. No. The word came out harder than intended. You're not running anymore. This is your home now. Is it? If you want it to be. She was quiet for a long moment, then leaned against his shoulder. The gesture was small, but it felt monumental. All right, she said softly. We fight. That evening, as they prepared dinner together, Anna told him more about Charles Whitmore, how his family had made their fortune in shipping, not all of it legal, how Charles himself was weak, propped up by his father's money and influence, how her father had deliberately cheated him at cards, knowing he couldn't pay, planning to use Anna as settlement all along. He sold me, she said bitterly, chopping vegetables with unnecessary force, like livestock. Dressed me up, sent me to Charles's rooms, told me to be charming and grateful. But you ran. After Charles tried to claim his payment early, she set down the knife carefully. He was drunk, pawing at me. I hit him with a champagne bottle and ran. Took what money I could find and got on the first train west. Caleb felt that familiar rage building. If he touches you again, he won't. She turned to face him. Because this time I'm not a frightened 17-year-old girl. I'm a woman who's learned to fight back, and I have something I didn't have then. What's that? You. She said simply, then turned back to her cooking as if she hadn't just shifted the world on its axis. They were finishing dinner when horses approached, multiple horses moving fast. Caleb reached for his rifle, but Anna put a hand on his arm. Wait, listen. The horses weren't approaching in attack formation. They were scattered, disorganized, and now Caleb could hear voices shouting something about fire. They rushed outside to see Tom Morrison from town, along with several other men all covered in soot and ash. Fire at the Hayworth place, Tom gasped. Barn caught spreading to the house. We need every hand we can get. Caleb didn't hesitate. Whatever his issues with the Hayworth's fire was every rancher's nightmare. Anna, stay here. Like hell, she said, already running for the wagon. I'm coming. They rode hard toward the orange glow on the horizon. The Hayworth ranch was in chaos when they arrived. The barn was fully engulfed and flames were licking at the main house. Men formed bucket brigades while women corralled panicking animals. Robert Hayworth stood frozen, watching his empire burn. It was James who was directing the firefighting efforts, his face grim with determination. Warren! He spotted them. Thank God. We need... Tell us where it... Caleb interrupted, past grievances forgotten in the face of disaster. They worked through the night. Anna proved herself again, fearlessly entering the house to help evacuate valuables, organizing the women to tend the injured, even helping to lead terrified horses away from the flames. When Dutch Collins, drunk and useless, got in the way, she shoved him aside without ceremony, earning surprised respect from the other men. By dawn, the barn was gone, but the house was saved. Everyone was soot-stained, exhausted, and strangely unified. Disaster had a way of making enemies into neighbors, at least temporarily. Robert Hayworth approached Caleb as they packed up to leave. His face was haggard, aged a decade in one night. Warren, Miss Foster. He cleared his throat. Thank you. You didn't have to come. Yes, we did, Caleb said simply. It's what neighbors do. Robert nodded slowly. About that water rights business. I was hasty. Wrong. There'll be no more trouble from us. He offered his hand, and after a moment Caleb shook it. As they drove home, the sun rising behind them, Anna said quietly, "You're a good man, Caleb Warren." "They would have done the same for us." "No, they wouldn't have. But you helped anyway. That's what makes you good." She was quiet for a moment, then added, "Martha was a lucky woman." "I was the lucky one," Caleb corrected. "Am the lucky one." She looked at him sharply. "Present tense. You're here, aren't you?" She smiled, then soft and genuine despite her exhaustion. "Yes, I'm here." When they reached home, they were too tired for pretense. They collapsed on the porch, leaning against each other, watching the sun climb higher. "We smell like smoke," Anna observed, "and horse and sweat, and God knows what else." "We should bathe."
We should. Neither moved. Caleb. What are we doing? He knew she wasn't asking about their current inactivity. "I don't know, but I think we're finding our way to something. Something more than a business partnership. Do you want it to be?" She was quiet for so long he thought she'd fallen asleep. Then so softly, he almost missed it. Yes. The admission hung between them fragile and precious. Caleb wanted to respond to tell her he felt the same, but Anna was already standing. "I'm going to wash up," she said, not meeting his eyes. "Then sleep. We can talk later." But later brought new challenges. A letter arrived from the county seat. Charles Whitmore had indeed filed a legal claim demanding Anna be returned to him or compensation be paid for breach of contract. $20,000. Anna read, her face pale. "He wants $20,000 or me." "We'll get a lawyer," Caleb said firmly.
"With what money we barely have enough to keep the ranch running. Then we'll find another way." Anna crumpled the letter in her fist, her knuckles white with the force of her grip. "There is no other way, Caleb. Men like Charles always win because they have money and connections and the law on their side." "Not always," a voice said from the doorway. They turned to find Reverend Philip standing there, hat in hand, his usually jovial face serious. "Forgive the intrusion, but your door was open and I couldn't help overhearing." "Reverend Titch," Caleb stood, "this isn't your concern." "On the contrary." The older man entered, followed surprisingly by James Hayworth. "After last night's fire, James and I got to talking. About community, about what we owe each other, about you, Miss Foster." James looked uncomfortable but determined. "My brother and I, we've been poor neighbors, Warren. Trying to push you out, making threats. That wasn't right." "What's done is done," Caleb said warily. "Maybe not." James pulled out a leather portfolio. "I'm not just here to apologize. I'm here as a lawyer. I studied law before I came back to help Robert with the ranch, and I've been looking into this Whitmore situation." Anna sank into a chair. "You've been investigating me." "Protecting you," James corrected. "See, after you shot him, which was the talk of 3 counties, by the way, I got curious. Did some digging. Turns out Mr. Charles Whitmore has quite a reputation back east. Several breach of promise suits, allegations of fraud, and most interesting, a warrant in Maryland for assault." "Assault," Caleb leaned forward. "On a young woman who refused his advances. Her family had money and connections, so charges were filed. He fled the state." James set the portfolio on the table. "I've telegraphed for certified copies of all documents. If Whitmore wants a legal fight, we'll give him one that destroys him." Anna stared at the papers, then at James. "Why would you help me?" "Because last night you risked your life to save our horses. Because you worked beside us as an equal, not looking for gratitude or praise. Because..." He paused, glancing at the Reverend. "Because Reverend Phillips reminded me that being a community means protecting each other, especially those who can't protect themselves." "I can protect myself," Anna said automatically. "We know," Reverend Phillips said gently. "We've all seen it, but you don't have to do it alone anymore." The tears came suddenly, shocking everyone, especially Anna herself. She covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking with sobs she'd been holding back for who knew how long. Caleb moved to comfort her, but she waved him off, fighting for control. "I'm sorry," she gasped. No one's ever... I've been alone for so long." Well, you're not alone now, Margaret Phillips said, appearing in the doorway with a basket. I brought food knowing neither of you would think to eat properly after last night, and I brought something else. She pulled out a piece of paper. A petition, signed by 37 citizens of Willow Creek stating that Anna Foster is a woman of good character who has contributed significantly to our community. Anna took the paper with trembling hands. The signatures included the Hayworth brothers, the Hendersons, even Dutch Collins' shaky scrawl at the bottom. Dutch signed this? Caleb asked incredulously. After Anna pushed him out of harm's way last night, even drunk as he was, he knew he owed her. Robert Hayworth had entered now, making the small room crowded. He's at my place sleeping it off, but he insisted on signing first. I don't understand, Anna whispered. Yesterday you all barely tolerated me. Yesterday we didn't know you, Robert said simply. Last night we learned who you really are. Not just a pretty face that upset our careful balance, but a woman of courage and strength, the kind of woman this territory needs. The meeting turned into an impromptu strategy session. James laid out the legal approach while Margaret organized the women's auxiliary to write letters of support. Robert offered to pay for the lawyer's fees. Consider it overdue payment for grazing rights, he said gruffly. Even Sheriff Collins, arriving late, promised to delay any legal proceedings as long as possible. After everyone left, Anna and Caleb sat in stunned silence. The table was covered with papers, plans, and half-eaten food from Margaret's basket. They're fighting for me, Anna said wonderingly. People who barely know me are ready to fight for me. That's what you do when you're part of something, Caleb said. When you belong somewhere. She looked at him, then really looked at him, and he saw something new in her green eyes. Not just gratitude or affection, but possibility. Hope like the colt in the barn. Do I belong here, Caleb? Really belong. He took her hand, rough from work, strong from struggle. You belong wherever you choose to be, Anna, but I hope you choose here. She squeezed his hand. Tell me about the first time you saw Martha. The request surprised him, but he found himself answering. It was at a barn raising like I mentioned. She was wearing a yellow dress, laughing at something her sister said. She had flour in her hair from baking all morning, and when she smiled, he paused, lost in memory. When she smiled, it was like seeing sunshine after a long winter. You loved her immediately. No, he said, surprising himself with the honesty. I was attracted to her, charmed by her. But love. That came later. Love came from watching her tend her sick father without complaint, from seeing her give her last penny to a family that had even less, from the way she sang to the chickens and named all the barn cats and cried when we had to put down a lame horse. Love came from knowing her, not just seeing her. Anna was quiet, then asked, "And what do you see when you look at me?" At first I saw danger, beauty that could destroy everything I'd built from grief. He turned her hand over, tracing the calluses on her palm. Now I see strength that humbles me, intelligence that challenges me, courage that amazes me. I see a woman who shot a man to protect me, who ran into a burning building to save strangers' possessions, who faces down bullies and wins over enemies and makes dead gardens grow again. That's not love, she said softly. No, he agreed. But it's heading there, if you'll let it. She pulled her hand away gently. I need time, Caleb. I need to know Charles can't take me away. I need to believe this is real, that I'm not going to wake up and find it all gone. Time I can give you, all the time you need. That night, for the first time, there was no pacing. Caleb lay awake listening to the quiet from Anna's room and wondered if she, like him, was thinking about possibilities. The next weeks passed in a blur of preparation. James Hayworth proved to be a formidable legal advocate, building a case that painted Charles Whitmore as a predator and Anna as his victim. The certified documents from Maryland arrived along with affidavits from 3 other women Charles had tried to claim through various schemes. Anna threw herself into ranch work with renewed energy. The garden flourished under her care, producing vegetables that she traded for supplies and goodwill in town. Hope the colt followed her around like a puppy, and even the stubborn milk cow seemed to prefer her touch. But it was the evenings Caleb treasured most. After dinner, they'd sit on the porch talking about everything and nothing. Anna told him about growing up in Boston, about the books she'd loved and the dreams she'd harbored before her father's gambling destroyed them. He told her about his childhood in Texas, about coming to Wyoming for adventure and finding loneliness instead. Until Martha, Anna would say. Until Martha, he'd agree. And now, until you. She never responded to such statements, but she didn't pull away either. Progress, he thought. Slow, careful progress. The court date was set for mid-September. Charles had hired a lawyer from Cheyenne, a sharp-dressed man named Cornelius Blackwood, who arrived in town like a harbinger of doom. He took rooms at Mrs. Wilkins' boarding house and immediately began investigating Anna and Caleb. "He's been asking questions," Tom Henderson reported one evening, "about your relationship, about whether the marriage is legitimate." "We're not married," Anna said flatly. "Well, that's the problem, isn't it?" Tom shifted uncomfortably. "Blackwood's arguing that since you're not married to Warren, you're still bound by your father's agreement. Says a single woman can't enter into contracts that supersede parental authority." "That's archaic," James Hayworth protested. He'd come for dinner, as had become his habit, while preparing the case. "Women have rights." "Not as many as we'd like to think," Anna interrupted bitterly. I knew this would be his approach. Question my autonomy, my ability to make my own choices. "Then we counter it," James said firmly. "We establish you as an independent woman who's been supporting herself. Or," Caleb said quietly, "we get married." The room went silent. Anna stared at him, her face unreadable. "It's a business arrangement," he continued, though his heart was pounding. "Like we originally planned. It would solve the legal problem, protect you from Charles's claims." "You do that?" Anna's voice was barely a whisper. "Marry me just to keep me safe." "I do it for any number of reasons," he said honestly. "Safety is just the most pressing one." James cleared his throat. "It would certainly simplify the legal situation. A married woman's previous obligations are generally considered void." Anna stood abruptly. "I need air." She fled to the porch and Caleb started to follow, but James stopped him. "Give her a moment. This is a lot to process." "I shouldn't have sprung it on her like that." "Maybe not, but it's not a bad idea, strategically speaking." "I'm not thinking strategically," Caleb admitted. "I'm thinking about keeping her here, safe, with me." James smiled slightly. "My brother owes me $5. I bet him you were in love with her." "I never said—" "You didn't have to. It's written all over your face every time you look at her." James gathered his papers. "I'll give you both some time to discuss this. But Caleb, don't wait too long. Blackwood's building his case, and we need every advantage we can get." After James left, Caleb found Anna in the garden, kneeling among the tomato plants in the fading light. She was picking beetles off the leaves, dropping them into a bucket of soapy water with mechanical precision. "Anna, it wouldn't be a business arrangement," she said without looking up. "Not anymore. Too much has happened. Too much has been said." "Would that be so bad?" She did look up then, and he saw tears on her cheeks. "I don't know how to be a wife, Caleb. Not a real one. I know how to run a house, manage accounts, work land. But the rest, the tenderness, the trust, the intimacy, I don't know if I can give you that." He knelt beside her, not touching, just close enough that she could feel his presence. "Martha and I didn't know how to be married either at first. We figured it out together day by day. Some days we got it wrong. Some days we fought over stupid things like how to fold sheets or whether to plant corn or wheat. But we learned. You loved each other from the start." "We chose each other from the start," he corrected. Love came with time and patience and 1,000 small moments of choosing each other again. Anna set down her bucket, wiping her hands on her apron. "And if I marry you and still can't be what you need, then we'll be two imperfect people doing our best, which is what most marriages are anyway." She laughed short and sharp. "You make it sound so simple." "The decision is simple. It's the living with it that's complicated." They sat in silence as darkness fell around them. Fireflies began their evening dance, and somewhere a mockingbird was singing its borrowed songs. "If we did this," Anna said carefully, "there would need to be understandings, such as time. I need time to adjust, to trust." to believe this is real. Already agreed to that. And if Charles challenges the marriage, claims it's not legitimate because it hasn't been consummated. Caleb felt heat rise in his face. We deal with that if it happens. James says the law is murky on such matters. The law is murky on most things concerning women, Anna said bitterly. Then softer. When? When what? When would we marry? His heart leapt. You're saying yes. I'm saying I'm considering it. When would you want to do this? Tomorrow? Tonight? Now? The words tumbled out before he could stop them. Before you change your mind, or Charles finds some new legal maneuver, or... She placed a finger on his lips, silencing him. Saturday, 4 days from now. That gives us time to do it properly, to have the town there as witnesses, to make it undeniable. Saturday, he agreed against her finger. She pulled her hand back, but slowly letting her finger trail across his lips. We should tell Reverend Phillips. Tomorrow. Tonight, let's just sit here. Watch the fireflies. Be ourselves for a little longer. So they sat in the garden as the moon rose, two people on the edge of a decision that would change everything. Anna eventually leaned against his shoulder, and he breathed in the scent of her soap and sunshine and something uniquely hers. Caleb, thank you for offering this, for being willing to bind yourself to me in my troubles. Anna, I've been bound to you since the moment you stepped off that train. This just makes it official. She turned to look at him, and in the moonlight her eyes were silver instead of green. I'll try to be a good wife. I can't promise to be Martha, but I'll try to be what you need. Don't be Martha, he said firmly. Be Anna. That's all I want. The next morning they rode to town together to speak with Reverend Phillips. The Reverend showed no surprise at their request, merely smiled and pulled out his calendar. Saturday it is. Shall we say 2 o'clock? That gives folks time to come in from the outlying ranches. We don't need a big fuss, Anna said quickly. My dear, you're not getting a fuss. You're getting a community celebration. There's a difference. Margaret Phillips bustled in with tea. Besides, a well-attended wedding with prominent witnesses will make it harder for that Whitmore character to challenge it. Word spread through Willow Creek like wildfire. Within hours, the entire town was buzzing with wedding preparations. Mrs. Henderson insisted on providing the dress. I've been saving this bolt of cream silk for something special. Lucy Phillips organized the younger women to decorate the church. Even the Hayworth brothers got involved with Robert, offering to host the reception at his newly repaired barn. It's too much, Anna protested that evening as gifts and offerings poured in. It's exactly enough, Caleb countered. They're not just celebrating a wedding. They're claiming you as one of their own. Let them. But as Saturday approached, Anna grew increasingly nervous. She'd started pacing again, and dark circles appeared under her eyes. What if he shows up? She asked Friday evening. What if Charles comes to stop the wedding? Then the entire town will witness him trying to force you into something against your will. Caleb took her hands, feeling them tremble. Anna, you're not alone in this anymore. You have me, you have the town, you have the law on your side. The law, she laughed bitterly. The law that says I'm property to be transferred from father to husband. The law that says you get to choose your husband, he corrected. And you're choosing me, aren't you? She looked at him for a long moment. Yes, God help me, yes. That night tradition dictated they sleep apart Anna at the Phillips house, Caleb alone at the ranch. He lay in his empty house thinking about the strange turns life took. 3 months ago, he'd been a ghost haunting his own life, going through motions without meaning. Tomorrow, he'd marry a woman he'd ordered from a catalog, but who'd become so much more than he'd ever imagined possible. He thought about Martha, wondering if she'd approve. She'd always said he needed someone strong, someone who could stand up to his stubbornness. You need a woman who won't let you wallow, she'd said during one of her healthier periods. Promise me you'll find someone who makes you fight for joy instead of surrendering to sorrow. Anna certainly made him fight, though, whether for joy or just survival he wasn't sure yet. But it was fighting, it was living, and that was more than he'd done in 3 years. Saturday dawned clear and hot, the September sun baking the earth despite autumn's approach. Caleb dressed in his best suit, his only suit, really, the one he'd worn to Martha's funeral. James Hayworth had to help him with the tie. His hands were shaking so badly. Nervous? James asked.
Terrified. Good. Means it matters. The church was packed when they arrived. It seemed everyone within 50 miles had come to witness the marriage of the mysterious beauty and the grieving rancher. Caleb took his place at the altar, trying not to fidget as the crowd whispered and watched. Then the doors opened and Anna appeared. The cream silk dress Mrs. Henderson had provided had been transformed into something elegant yet simple. It followed Anna's tall, slim figure without being inappropriate, and someone, probably Lucy, had woven wildflowers into her hair. She carried a bouquet of roses from Margaret Phillips's garden, and her face was veiled with a piece of lace that had belonged to Mrs. Henderson's mother. But it was her eyes that caught Caleb. Through the veil, those green eyes found his and held conveying fear and determination, and something else, something that might have been the beginning of love. Tom Morrison walked her down the aisle he'd volunteered when it became clear she had no one else. The crowd stood, and Caleb heard more than one woman sniffle. This town, which had initially viewed Anna with suspicion, had embraced her completely. Reverend Phillips performed the ceremony with appropriate gravity, though his eyes twinkled when he reached the part about any objections. The church door banged open. Charles Whitmore stood there, travel-stained and furious, his arm in a sling from where Anna had shot him. "I object. This woman is promised to me." The congregation turned as one, and the hostility in the room was palpable. Sheriff Collins stood up, hand on his gun. The Hayworth brothers moved to block the aisle. Dutch Collins, sober for once, cracked his knuckles meaningfully. "Mr. Whitmore," Reverend Phillips said calmly, "on what grounds do you object? She's mine." Her father is not here," the Reverend interrupted. "Miss Foster is a woman of age capable of making her own choices. Unless you have legal documentation stating otherwise." Blackwood, the lawyer from Cheyenne, stepped forward from where he'd been sitting in the back. "My client has documentation of a debt. A debt is not a person." "Mr. Blackwood, yet," James Hayworth said, moving forward with papers of his own. "And I have here a warrant for your client's arrest from Maryland. Sheriff Collins, would you care to do your duty?" The sheriff grinned. "With pleasure." Charles went pale. "You can't. This isn't Maryland." "No, but we honor warrants from other states. And there's also the matter of you threatening Miss Foster and Mr. Warren with a weapon. Multiple witnesses to that." "This is a conspiracy," Charles shouted as the sheriff approached. "You're all in on it. She's bewitched you all with her beauty, just like she bewitched me." "Son," Reverend Phillips said quietly, "the only one bewitched here is you. Bewitched by greed and pride and the mistaken belief that you can own another person. Sheriff, please remove this man so we can continue with this joyful occasion." As Charles was dragged out shouting threats and promises of legal retribution, Anna turned to Caleb. Through her veil, he could see she was crying. "It's all right," he whispered. "It's over." "No," she whispered back. "It's just beginning." Reverend Phillips cleared his throat. "Well, that was exciting. Shall we continue?" The crowd laughed, tension breaking, and the ceremony resumed. When they reached the vows, Anna's voice was clear and strong. "I, Anna Foster, take you, Caleb Warren, to be my husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish till death do us part." Caleb repeated his vows, meaning every word in ways he hadn't expected. When Reverend Phillips pronounced them husband and wife, when he lifted Anna's veil and saw her tear-streaked but smiling face when he kissed her. To the cheers of the entire town, he felt something shift in his chest. Not healing that would take time, but the possibility of it. The reception in Robert Hayworth's barn was a blur of congratulations, food, and dancing. Anna danced with what seemed like every man in the county, while their wives chatted with Caleb about how lucky he was. Charles Whitmore was locked in the sheriff's office, awaiting transport to Maryland. Blackwood had already left town, recognizing a lost cause. "You did it," James said, clapping Caleb on the back. "You saved her." "She saved herself," Caleb corrected, watching Anna laugh at something Mrs. Henderson was saying. "I just gave her a place to do it." As the sun set and the party continued, Caleb found Anna standing outside looking at the stars. Overwhelmed, he asked. Grateful, she corrected. Grateful and terrified and hopeful and about a dozen other things I can't name. Sounds about right for a wedding day. She turned to him, and in the light spilling from the barn, she looked almost ethereal. Caleb, about tonight. Nothing you don't want, he said quickly. We have time. All the time you need. She stepped closer, placing a hand on his chest. What if I don't need as much time as I thought? His breath caught. Anna. She kissed him soft and sweet and full of promise. Take me home, husband. Our home. They left the party quietly, though everyone noticed. The knowing smiles and gentle teasing followed them to the wagon. The ride home was silent but charged with anticipation. At the ranch, Caleb helped her down from the wagon, and they stood for a moment looking at the house that was now officially theirs together. Are you sure? He asked one more time. No, she said honestly, but I want to be. Help me be sure, Caleb. He carried her over the threshold, tradition demanding it, but set her down gently in the main room. The house was dark except for moonlight streaming through windows. Anna, we don't have to... She silenced him with another kiss, this one deeper, more demanding. I know. That's why I want to. Because we don't have to. Because you'd wait forever if I asked. Because you see me as Anna, not as property or prize or problem to be solved. You're my wife, he said wonderingly, and you're my husband, my choice, my decision. She took his hand, leading him toward his room, their room now. Show me what it means to be chosen back. Later, much later, as they lay entwined in the bed he'd once shared with Martha, Anna traced patterns on his chest in the darkness. Was it different? She asked quietly. With Martha? Everything with Martha was different, he said honestly. She was my first love, my young love, all discovery and sweetness. This, you, it's deeper, harder earned, more precious because we both know what it costs to lose. I've never been anyone's wife before, she admitted. Never really been anyone's anything, just a daughter to be traded, a beauty to be possessed. You're Anna Warren now, he said, liking the sound of it. My wife, my partner, my equal. Never my possession. She was quiet for a moment, then said, Tell me we did the right thing. Tell me this wasn't just about stopping Charles. He turned to face her, seeing her eyes glint in the darkness. We did the only thing. The thing we've been heading towards since you arrived. Charles just forced the timing. And Martha. Martha is my past, my cherished, treasured past. But you're my present. And if you'll have me, my future. She kissed him then, and there were no more words, no more ghosts, just two people finding each other in the darkness and choosing to hold on. The morning after their wedding dawned quiet and golden with a quality of light that made everything seem new. Caleb woke first. Anna curled against his side, her hair spread across his chest like spun honey. For a moment, he couldn't quite believe she was real, that yesterday had happened, that Charles Whitmore was gone, and Anna was his wife in truth. She stirred, green eyes fluttering open to meet his. Good morning, husband. Good morning, wife. They smiled at each other shy, despite the intimacy they'd shared, and Caleb thought this might be what resurrection felt like. Not a dramatic rising from the dead, but a quiet awakening to possibilities you'd forgotten existed. Their peace was shattered by pounding on the door. Caleb grabbed his pants while Anna pulled the sheet up to her chin, both instantly alert. Warren, open up. We got trouble. It was Dutch Collins, and he sounded sober and scared, two things that never boded well. Caleb yanked on his shirt and went to the door, while Anna quickly dressed behind the bedroom curtain. What is it, Dutch? That lawyer Blackwood, he's back with federal marshals. They're saying the marriage ain't legal, that Miss Anna Mrs. Warren is still bound by some contract. They're at the sheriff's office now, but they're coming here next. Anna emerged fully dressed and composed, despite having had mere minutes to prepare. Federal marshals Charles doesn't have that kind of influence. No, Dutch said, but his father does. Old man Whitmore arrived on the morning train with a judge from Denver and papers saying you're a runaway ward or some such nonsense. Ward? Anna's face went white. He's claiming guardianship.
Something about your father signing papers before he died, making Whitmore Sr. your legal guardian until you marry with his consent. Caleb felt rage building in his chest. She's 28 years old. She doesn't need a guardian. Papers say she was 17 when they were signed, still binding according to this judge. Anna sank into a chair. My father. Of course. He would have signed anything Charles's father put in front of him if it meant clearing even part of his debt. We need James Hayworth, Caleb said, and Reverend Phillips, and every person who witnessed our wedding yesterday. Already sent Tom Morrison to gather folks, Dutch said. The whole town's up in arms about this. Mrs. Henderson near about took Blackwood's head off with a rolling pin when he suggested the marriage was invalid. Despite everything, Anna smiled slightly. I would have liked to see that. Ma'am, Mrs. Warren, I owe you an apology, Dutch said suddenly, hat in his hands. I was wrong about you. Dead wrong. You're the best thing that's happened to this town to Warren here in years. We ain't letting them take you. Before Anna could respond, horses appeared on the horizon. Not the federal marshals yet, but James Hayworth riding hard with Robert beside him. They dismounted in a cloud of dust, both grim-faced. We've got problems, James said without preamble. Whitmore Sr. is claiming Anna's father was mentally incompetent when he signed the guardianship papers, but that they're still binding. It's a legal maze meant to tie us up in court for months while they pressure Anna to comply. What does he want? Anna asked quietly. Charles is facing prison in Maryland. Surely his father isn't doing this just for his son's pride. James exchanged a look with Robert. There's more. We did some digging after Dutch came to get us. Turns out your father had something Whitmore Sr. wants. Something about shipping routes documentation of illegal trades. Whitmore thinks you have it. Anna stood slowly. The ledgers. Father's private ledgers. You have them, Caleb asked. I took them when I ran. I thought they might be worth something someday leverage if I needed it. She went to their bedroom, returning with a wrapped packet Caleb had never seen before. These document 20 years of Whitmore Sr.'s illegal activities, smuggling, bribery, even murder. Father kept records of everything protection against his creditors. That's why they want you, James breathed. Not for Charles's wounded pride, but to get these and destroy them. Or to control me so I can never use them, Anna added. The sound of approaching horses cut their conversation short. The federal marshals had arrived, two hard-faced men who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else, accompanied by Blackwood and an elderly man who could only be Whitmore Sr. The old man was nothing like his son. Where Charles was soft and weak, his father was carved from granite with cold eyes and a mouth that had forgotten how to smile. He looked at Anna like she was a particularly troublesome piece of property. Miss Foster, he said, ignoring her married name, you've led us quite a chase. Mrs. Warren, Caleb corrected firmly. She's my wife. A marriage conducted under false pretenses is no marriage at all, Whitmore Sr. said. Miss Foster is my legal ward. She cannot marry without my consent. Those papers were signed 11 years ago, James interjected. The guardianship expired when she turned 21. Not according to the terms, Ian, Blackwood said smoothly. The guardianship explicitly states it continues until marriage with guardian consent. That's barbaric, Robert Hayworth said. That's the law, Whitmore Sr. replied. Now, Miss Foster, you'll come with us peacefully, or these federal marshals will arrest Mr. Warren here for kidnapping. Kidnapping? Anna stepped forward. I came here of my own free will. You're not legally capable of free will without your guardian's consent. Any actions taken without my approval are void. The crowd that had been gathering erupted in angry voices. Half the town had arrived drawn by the drama, and they didn't like what they were hearing. This is Wyoming territory, not medieval England, Mrs. Henderson shouted. The law is the law, one of the marshals said uncomfortably. If the papers are legitimate. They're not, Anna said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. She stood straight, chin raised, every inch the woman who'd faced down Charles with a rifle. The papers are forgeries. Whitmore Sr.'s face darkened. You're lying. Am I? Then you won't mind if we examine them closely, check the dates, the signatures, compare them to other documents my father signed. She pulled a paper from the packet she still held. Like this one dated 3 days after your supposed guardianship papers, where my father clearly states he has no living children. What? Caleb stared at her. My father disowned me when I refused Charles. Legally dissolved our relationship. It's all here filed in Boston courts. If I wasn't his daughter, he couldn't very well sign guardianship papers for me, could he? Blackwood snatched the paper, studying it with growing alarm. This appears genuine. Because it is, Anna said. My father was many things, but he was thorough. When I wouldn't be sold like cattle, he declared me dead to him. Literally, legally dead. Then how did you sign for the mail-order bride service? Whitmore Sr. demanded. A non-person can't enter contracts. I used my mother's maiden name Foster. Anna Foster, not Anna Morrison. A completely different person, legally speaking. James Hayworth was grinning now. She's right. If the disownment papers are real, then Morrison had no daughter to sign guardianship over. The Whitmore papers are void. This is ridiculous, Whitmore Sr. snarled. A technicality. The law is the law, Anna quoted back at him. Isn't that what you said? The federal marshals looked relieved. Seems like a matter for the courts to decide, not us, one said. We're not taking anyone anywhere until this is sorted legally. But, Blackwood started. It's Sunday, the marshal continued. No courts open. We'll wait until tomorrow, see what a real judge says. Not one you brought with you, Mr. Whitmore. The judge from Denver, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. I resent the implication. Resent all you want, Sheriff Collins said. This is my jurisdiction, and I say everyone calms down until we can sort this proper-like. Whitmore Sr.'s face was purple with rage. This isn't over. No, Anna agreed. It's not, because there's still the matter of these. She held up the ledgers. 20 years of illegal activities all documented in my father's hand. I wonder what a federal prosecutor would make of them. You're blackmailing me. I'm offering you a trade. You leave us alone, forget this guardianship nonsense, and I'll forget these ledgers exist. Or you can persist, and I'll make sure every newspaper from here to New York knows exactly how you built your fortune. Father and son had the same tell. Caleb noticed they both clenched their left fist when cornered. Whitmore Sr. was doing it now, knuckles white with suppressed fury. You little... Careful, Caleb warned, stepping between them. That's my wife you're talking to. Your wife is a... The click of multiple guns cocking stopped him mid-sentence. The townspeople had armed themselves, and every barrel was pointed at the Whitmores and their party. I think, Reverend Phillips said mildly, though he too held a rifle, that Mr. Whitmore was just leaving. Weren't you? Whitmore Sr. looked around at the wall of hostile faces. These weren't hired guns or city folks who could be intimidated. These were frontier people who'd claimed Anna as their own, and they'd fight for her. This isn't over, he said again, but the threat sounded hollow now. Yes, it is, Anna said firmly. Because if you come back, if you send anyone else, if you so much as think about disrupting our lives again, I'll destroy you. And unlike my father, I keep my promises. She tossed one of the smaller ledgers at his feet. A sample, so you know I'm serious. That one only covers 1871, but it's particularly interesting. Something about a ship that supposedly sank with all hands, but actually made port in Cuba. Whitmore Sr. picked up the ledger, opened it, and went pale. How did he? My father was many things, but stupid wasn't one of them. He knew that information was power, and he collected it obsessively. Anna's voice was steel wrapped in silk. Leave, now! Don't come back! The standoff stretched taut as wire. Then Whitmore Sr. nodded once, sharp and bitter. Blackwood, we're leaving. But sir, we're leaving. As they mounted their horses, Whitmore Sr. looked back at Anna. You're just like your father, beautiful and ruthless. No, Anna said. I'm nothing like him. He would have sold these ledgers to the highest bidder. I'm giving you a chance to walk away. Don't waste it. They rode off in a cloud of dust and defeat, the federal marshals following at a distance, clearly relieved to be done with the whole mess. The crowd waited until they were out of sight before erupting in cheers. Anna sagged against Caleb, all her strength suddenly gone. It's over. It's really over. You were magnificent, he whispered against her hair.
Absolutely magnificent. I was terrified. Couldn't tell. She laughed shakily. I've been saving those ledgers for 3 years, never knowing when I'd need them. I can't believe it worked. You outmaneuvered them completely, James said admiringly. That bit about your father disowning you, brilliant. And true, Anna said quietly. He really did disown me. Said I was dead to him when I wouldn't marry Charles. The crowd was dispersing, everyone talking excitedly about what they'd witnessed. Margaret Phillips hugged Anna tightly. You're one of us now, officially and permanently. No one's taking you anywhere. As people headed back to town or their ranches, Robert Hayworth lingered. Mrs. Warren Anna, what you did at the fire, and now this. You've got more courage than most men I know. Courage is just fear that said its prayers, Anna replied. Something my mother used to say. Well, whatever it is, you've got it in spades. He tipped his hat. Welcome to the neighborhood officially. When everyone had gone, Caleb and Anna stood alone in their dusty yard looking at each other with a mixture of exhaustion and elation. So, Caleb said, what do we do now? Now. Anna smiled, and it was like sunshine after a storm. Now we live. We work the ranch, tend the garden, raise horses.
We have Sunday dinners and church socials and all the normal things that normal people do. You think we can be normal? No. She laughed. But we can pretend. And maybe if we pretend long enough, it becomes true. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Anna burned the remaining ledgers in the fire barrel. Each page that turned to ash was another chain broken, another tie to her past severed. No more leverage, Caleb observed. No more need for it. I have something better now. What's that? A home, a husband, a community that would aim guns at federal marshals for me. She smiled at him. That's worth more than all the secrets in those ledgers. Hope the colt wandered over to the porch, sticking his nose through the rails to lip at Anna's skirt. She stroked his face absently, and Caleb was struck by the peaceful domesticity of the moment. Do you miss it? He asked. The excitement, the danger. God, no. I've had enough excitement to last 3 lifetimes. She leaned against his shoulder. I want boring. I want predictable. I want to wake up knowing that the most dramatic thing that might happen is a chicken getting into the garden. That can be pretty dramatic. Not compared to today. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge. The coyotes started their nightly chorus, but it seemed less mournful now, more like a celebration of surviving another day. Caleb, thank you for standing with me, for being willing to fight for me. Thank you for being worth fighting for. She turned to kiss him soft and sweet in the gathering darkness. Take me to bed, husband. Our second night as married folks shouldn't be spent on the porch. As they went inside, Caleb glanced at the mantel where Martha's photograph sat. For the first time in 3 years, it didn't hurt to look at it. Martha seemed to be smiling, as if giving her blessing to this new life, this second chance at love. She would have liked you, he told Anna. I would have liked her too. Any woman who could love you that deeply must have been extraordinary. She was, and so are you in completely different ways. The weeks that followed were almost suspiciously quiet. No more surprise visitors, no legal challenges, no threats. Just the daily rhythm of ranch life as autumn progressed toward winter. The garden produced abundantly, and Anna proved adept at preserving food for the cold months ahead. She traded vegetables for supplies, building relationships and goodwill throughout the community. Hope grew strong and swift, and Anna began training him properly. She had a gift with horses that continued to amaze Caleb, a gentle firmness that earned trust and obedience. Where did you learn so much about horses? He asked one day, watching her work Hope through his paces. My mother's family raised them before she married my father. She taught me when I was young before she died. Anna's voice softened with memory. She said horses were more honest than people. They never lie about what they feel. Is that why you trust them more than people? I didn't trust anyone, Anna corrected, until you. What changed? She considered this still working with Hope. You never tried to own me. Even when you had every right, when I was desperate and alone and would have agreed to anything, you never tried to make me less than I was.
You let me be strong. You were always strong. I just got out of your way. She laughed. Is that what you call it? Standing between me and the Whitmores punching Dutch Collins, offering to marry me to keep me safe. That was just love, she said simply. That was love, even if neither of us was ready to call it that.
He went to her then, not caring that hope was between them, and pulled her into a kiss that said everything he couldn't put into words. The colt, apparently deciding he was being ignored, nudged them both with his nose until they laughed and separated. Jealous thing? Anna said fondly, rubbing Hope's neck. Can't blame him. You're worth being jealous over. October arrived with its golden days and crisp nights. The ranch was thriving under their combined efforts. Caleb had negotiated better prices for his cattle with Anna's help, and they'd saved enough to buy winter feed with money left over. We could expand, Anna suggested one evening, going over the ledgers. Buy the Morrison place. Tom mentioned they're thinking of moving to Denver. That's ambitious. That's smart. More land means more cattle, more horses. Hope's bloodline is excellent. We could start breeding. He studied her face in the lamplight, seeing the excitement there. You really want to build something here, don't you? With Martha, we were always planning for children that never came. Building for a family that never happened. I stopped planning after she died. And now I have you planning for both of us. She set aside the ledgers. Caleb, do you want children? The question hung in the air like smoke. They'd been married over a month now, and the subject had never come up. I don't know, he said honestly. Do you? I never thought I'd have the chance, she admitted. I assumed I'd be running forever, or trapped in a loveless marriage to Charles. Children weren't part of either scenario. But now, she moved to sit beside him. Now I think about what they'd be like. Your steady nature and my stubbornness. Your blue eyes and my sharp tongue. God help us, she laughed. They'd be terrors. They'd be perfect. They looked at each other, the possibility of a future neither had imagined suddenly real and present. Then Anna kissed him, and thoughts of the future dissolved into the very present reality of desire and love, and two people choosing each other again and again. November brought the first snowlight dustings that made the ranch look like something from a fairy tale. Anna had never seen snow in Wyoming, and her delight was infectious. She stood in the yard with her arms spread, face turned to the sky, catching snowflakes on her tongue like a child. You'll freeze, Caleb called from the porch. I'll live, she called back, spinning in circles until she was dizzy. He joined her in the yard, catching her when she stumbled. Beautiful and crazy. Practical and proper, she countered, then shrieked with laughter when he dumped a handful of snow down her back. The resulting snowball fight had them both soaked and breathless, taking refuge by the fire with hot coffee and warm blankets. I never did this in Boston, Anna set her head on his shoulder. Snow was something to endure, not enjoy. Everything's different here. Everything's different with you. That night, as they lay in bed listening to the wind howl, Anna told him more about her childhood, about a mother who died young and a father who gambled away his grief, about being beautiful in a world that saw beauty as currency, about learning to be sharp because soft got you hurt. I built walls, she said in the darkness, so many walls that I forgot what it was like on the other side of them. And now you've knocked them all down, and I'm terrified and exhilarated and alive in ways I never knew possible. I love you, he said, the words coming easier now. I love your walls and your strength and your scared, brave heart. I love you too, she whispered. I love your steadiness and your hidden fire and the way you see me as Anna, not as beautiful Anna or dangerous Anna or any other qualifier, just Anna. Just Anna is more than enough. So is just Caleb. They made love slowly, tenderly, with the storm raging outside and warmth within. Afterward, Anna traced the scar on his shoulder from a long-ago fence-mending accident. We're both marked, she said. You by wire and work me by choices and chances. Scars mean we survived. No, she corrected. Scars mean we lived. The letter came 3 days later, delivered by a special courier who must have fought through the snow to reach them.
Anna went pale when she saw the return address Boston from a law firm she recognized. "What is it?" Caleb asked. Though her face told him it wasn't good news, she opened it with trembling fingers, read it once, twice, then handed it to him. "Your father's dead," he said, reading quickly. "And he left you everything. Everything he hadn't already lost," Anna said numbly. "Which according to this is surprisingly substantial. The house in Boston, investments he'd hidden, even some shipping interests the Whitmores didn't know about." "Anna, this is good news. You're wealthy." "I'm cursed," she interrupted. "That money comes from cheating and lying and selling his daughter like property. I don't want it." "Then give it away. Or use it for good. But don't let pride keep you from taking what's rightfully yours." She stood pacing, not the measured 3 steps of old, but an agitated prowl. "You don't understand. If I take it, I become part of it, part of his legacy of greed and manipulation." "No," Caleb said firmly. "You become someone who takes something ugly and makes it beautiful, like you did with this ranch, like you did with me." She stopped pacing, looking at him with tears in her eyes. "You weren't ugly. I was dead inside. That's worse than ugly." She came to him then, letting him hold her while she sorted through the complexity of losing a father she'd already lost, of inheriting wealth she didn't want from a man who'd tried to sell her. "We could buy the Morrison place outright," she said finally. "And the Garrett place too heard they're struggling. We could build something real, something lasting. Unless you want me to take my fortune and leave?" She was joking, but there was real fear beneath it. "Anna Warren, you're stuck with me now. For better or worse, remember. Even if better includes Boston money and worse includes Boston memories. Even then." She kissed him, salt tears mixing with sweetness. "Then we'll take it. We'll take his money and build something he never could. A family, a legacy based on love instead of greed. That's my practical girl." "That's your romantic fool," she corrected. "Practical Anna would run from this money like it was poisoned." "Maybe it takes both. Practical and romantic. Foolish and wise." The snow had stopped and weak winter sunlight was breaking through the clouds. It illuminated the room, turning everything golden, and Caleb thought he'd never seen anything as beautiful as Anna in that moment. Not because of her face, though that was lovely, but because of the strength in her spine and the hope in her eyes. "We should go to town," she said. "Telegraph the lawyers, let them know our decision, and maybe stop at the church." "Why the church?" "To thank God for second chances, and thirds and fourths and however many it took to get us here." "You're religious now." "I'm grateful. There's a difference." They bundled up against the cold and took the sleigh to town, the horse's breath clouding in the frigid air. The town was quiet, muffled by snow, but smoke rose from chimneys and life went on despite winter's grip. At the telegraph office, Anna composed a message accepting her inheritance with conditions about how it would be transferred. The operator, young Sam Henderson, tried not to look curious, but failed. "Big news, Mrs. Warren. Just family business," Anna said evasively. But within an hour, the whole town knew that Anna Warren had inherited a fortune. The reactions were mixed, some worried she'd leave for finer places, others excited about what this might mean for the community. Margaret Phillips put everyone's fears to rest. "That girl's not going anywhere. She's got roots now, deep ones. Money doesn't change that." She was right. Anna used the first of the funds to pay off mortgages for struggling neighbors, always anonymously, though everyone knew the source. She funded a proper school, bringing in a second teacher, so Lucy Phillips could pursue her dream of attending college. She even paid for Doc Morrison's new medical equipment, ensuring the town had proper health care. "You're going to give it all away, Caleb observed one evening as she made lists of improvements and gifts. "Not all. We're keeping enough for the ranch for our plans, but the rest does good instead of harm. Your father would hate this." "Good." But the best use of the money came in spring when Anna announced she was bringing in a specialist from Denver, not for the ranch or the town, but for herself. "I want to know why Martha couldn't have children," she told Caleb, "and if the same might be true for me." The specialist, a German doctor with progressive ideas about women's health, spent 3 days examining Anna and reviewing Martha's history as best they could reconstruct it. "Your late wife had scarlet fever as a child, yes.
he asked Caleb. When she was 12. That explains much. The fever can damage internal matters. Children would have been unlikely. And Anna, the doctor smiled. Mrs. Warren is quite healthy. I see no reason she cannot have children, should that be your wish. Anna gripped Caleb's hand so tight he thought bones might break. Really, though these matters are never certain, of course, but physically you are capable. That night, they made love with a new tenderness, a new possibility between them, not trying for a child, not yet, but knowing they could. I want them to know about Martha, Anna said afterward. Our children. I want them to know there was another woman who loved their father who helped make him who he is. You don't mind? How could I mind? She's part of our story even if she's not here for this chapter. Summer came with its usual demands of ranch life, but also with new joys. The expanded ranch was thriving. Hope had grown into a magnificent stallion, and they'd bought mares for breeding. The garden was triple its original size, and Anna had hired 2 local boys to help tend it. Then in August, Anna woke him with urgent shaking. Caleb, wake up! What's wrong? He was instantly alert, reaching for the rifle. Nothing's wrong. She was laughing and crying simultaneously. Everything's right. I'm pregnant. The world stopped. Started. Stopped again. The doctor confirmed it yesterday. I wanted to wait until I was sure. He pulled her into his arms, both of them shaking with joy and terror and 1,000 unnamed emotions. We're having a baby, he said wonderingly. We're having a baby, she confirmed. They sat there in the dawn light, holding each other and their secret, their miracle, their future. Outside, hope whinnied and the cattle lowed, and life went on as it always did, but completely changed. Are you happy? Anna asked against his chest. Happy doesn't cover it. I'm resurrected. She pulled back to look at him. That's the perfect word. We're both resurrected. From different deaths, but resurrected all the same.